The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Warp fields bend space, transporters convert matter to energy, and subspace carries our messages across the stars. But what happens when something tears through the fabric of reality itself, bringing with it technology that defies every sensor reading, every established theory, and a soldier who learned to kill before he learned to dream? Deep Space Nine hung in the darkness like a monument to stubbornness, a Cardassian mining station repurposed into the Federation's forward operating base in a war that was grinding the Alpha Quadrant into dust. The Dominion War had been raging for 2 years, and the casualty reports grew longer every day. Captain Benjamin Sisko stood on the ops deck, reviewing fleet dispositions with the grim efficiency of a man who'd stopped counting the dead. "Captain, I'm detecting an anomaly near the wormhole," Lieutenant Commander Jadzia Dax announced, her fingers dancing across the science station console. "Subspace distortion, but the signature is unlike anything in our database." Sisko turned toward the view screen. The Bajoran wormhole, the celestial temple to the prophets, the gateway to the Gamma Quadrant, pulsed with its usual ethereal beauty. But something was wrong. Space itself seemed to be tearing, a jagged rift of violet and crimson energy spiraling outward like a wound in reality. "Shields up," Sisko ordered. "Major Kira, hail any vessels in the area." "Dax, what are we looking at?" "The rift is generating exotic particles I've never seen before," Dax said, her voice carrying that mix of scientific curiosity and trill caution that came from 8 lifetimes of experience. "They're interfering with our sensors, creating dead zones in subspace. Benjamin, whatever's coming through is bringing its own laws of physics with it." The rift convulsed. Energy discharged in brilliant cascades, and then, something emerged. It was a vessel, but not like any starship in Federation records. 18 meters tall, humanoid in configuration, white and blue armor plating scarred by weapons fire. It moved with impossible grace for something so massive, thrusters firing in controlled bursts as it oriented itself in the vacuum. In its right hand, it carried what could only be described as a rifle, oversized, angular, clearly designed for the mechanical warrior's grip. "What in the prophet's name is that?" Major Kira Nerys breathed. Chief Miles O'Brien was already running scans from the engineering station. "It's not a ship, not exactly. More like, a suit. A mobile armor suit with a pilot inside. I'm detecting one humanoid life sign, but the energy readings from that machine are off the scale. Some kind of fusion reactor, but the configuration is completely foreign." Inside the RX-78-2 Gundam's cockpit, Amuro Ray fought to orient himself. Warning lights blazed across his instruments, navigation was down, communications were receiving nothing but static, and the ambient energy readings made no sense. One moment he'd been fighting Xeon mobile suits near Side 7, Minovsky particles thick enough to turn space combat into knife-fighting range. The next, reality had twisted, and he'd been pulled through something that felt like falling through the fabric of space itself. He was 19 years old. He'd been fighting for 4 years, since White Base had stumbled into a war zone and a civilian teenager had climbed into an experimental mobile suit because no one else could. He'd killed more people than he could count. He'd felt them die through his Newtype awareness, brief flashes of terror and pain and final thoughts that would haunt him forever. And now he was somewhere else entirely. "Where am I?" he muttered, running diagnostics. The Gundam systems were operational, but energy reserves were at 60%. The beam rifle had maybe 20 shots left before it was depleted. His Vulcan guns were loaded, his beam sabers were functional, and his shield was intact. Combat ready, but for how long? His Newtype senses tingled, that sixth sense that let him perceive intent, emotion, spatial awareness beyond normal human limits. He could feel presences nearby. Hundreds of them. Thousands. A massive structure dead ahead, and beyond it, something that made his instincts scream danger. On Deep Space Nine, Sisko made a decision. Hail them. Universal Translator, all frequencies. Dax worked her console. Channel open. Unidentified vessel, this is Captain Benjamin Sisko of the United Federation of Planets, commanding Deep Space Nine. You've entered Bajoran space through what appears to be a spatial anomaly. We mean you no harm, but we need to understand your situation. Please respond. Inside the Gundam, Amuro's radio crackled to life. The language was completely foreign, but then something shifted, the words reorganized themselves into Japanese, the translation slightly stilted but comprehensible. Someone was trying to talk to him. Not shoot him. Actually talk. He keyed his external speakers, his voice hoarse from combat fatigue. This is Ensign Amuro Ray, Earth Federation Space Force. I don't know where I am or how I got here. 1 minute I was in combat, the next, he paused, looking at the impossible architecture of the station ahead. The next, I was here. Before Sisko could respond, alarm klaxons shrieked across ops. Captain, sensors are detecting multiple warships emerging from the wormhole, Kira reported, her voice tight. Dominion signatures. 12 Jem'Hadar attack fighters and 2 battlecruisers. They're on attack vector, heading straight for us and that mobile suit. Sisko's jaw clenched. The Dominion had been probing DS-9's defenses all week, testing response times, looking for weaknesses. And now they had a new target to investigate, or eliminate. Red alert, he ordered. All hands to battle stations. Charge weapons and prepare to intercept. Amuro saw them on his limited sensors, warships, sleek and predatory, moving with the coordinated precision of a wolf pack. His hands moved to the Gundam's controls instinctively, muscle memory overriding conscious thought. The mobile suit's thrusters flared, and it accelerated toward the incoming formation. Wait! Dax called out. Captain, he's moving to engage. Amuro didn't wait for permission or backup. He'd learned in his first battle that hesitation meant death. The lead Jem'Hadar fighter opened fire with polaron beams, exotic orange energy that his sensors couldn't quite categorize. He twisted the Gundam sideways, trusting his Newtype reflexes, and the beams scorched past where he'd been a heartbeat before. His beam rifle came up, and he fired. The megaparticle beam, a weapon born from Minovsky physics and a reality where beam weapons had revolutionized warfare, lanced across space. It struck the Jem'Hadar fighter dead center. The ship's shields flared, held for half a second, then collapsed. The beam punched through the hull, and the fighter detonated in a brilliant explosion. On Deep Space Nine, complete silence filled ops. Did that mobile suit just destroy a Jem'Hadar fighter with one shot? O'Brien asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sisko stared at the viewscreen, watching the white and blue mobile suit dance through enemy fire with impossible agility. Its pilot moved like he'd been born in that machine, predicting attack patterns, retaliating with devastating precision. Another fighter exploded. Then another. Get me a weapons lock on those battlecruisers, Sisko ordered. Prepare to launch runabouts. That pilot is defending the station, and we're going to back him up. Amuro felt it then, that familiar sensation of minds focused on killing, the cold determination of soldiers bred for war. But there was something else, something that made his Newtype awareness recoil. These weren't ordinary soldiers. Their minds felt hollow, like they weren't quite complete, like they existed only to fight and die. A Jem'Hadar battlecruiser fired a full volley. Polaron beams converged on the Gundam from 3 angles simultaneously, a kill box, inescapable by conventional physics. Amuro's mind expanded. Time seemed to slow. He felt the trajectories before they materialized, his Newtype awareness painting the future in his consciousness. The Gundam's thrusters fired in a sequence that would seem random to anyone else, but to Amuro it was as natural as breathing. The mobile suit spiraled through the kill box, beams missing by meters, and he fired twice in rapid succession. Both shots hit. The battlecruiser's shields collapsed, and its port nacelle exploded in a cascade of secondary detonations. Prophets preserve us, Kira whispered. What is he? Sisko tapped his comm badge. Sisko to Defiant. Commander Worf, launch immediately and provide support to the mobile suit. Coordinate your attack patterns with his movements. Understood, Captain, came Worf's growl. The battle lasted 3 minutes. By the time it was over, 8 Jem'Hadar fighters were destroyed, both battlecruisers were crippled and retreating, and the RX-78-2 Gundam hung in space like a guardian angel wrapped in Luna titanium armor. Amuro's hands shook on the controls. The familiar post-combat adrenaline dump hit him, and he forced himself to breathe slowly. His energy reserves were at 40%. He'd used up 12 beam rifle shots. And he had absolutely no idea what he was going to do next. His radio crackled again. The same voice from before, Captain Sisko. Ensign Ray, I don't know where you came from or how that machine of yours works, but you just saved a lot of lives. Would you be willing to come aboard the station? We have a lot to talk about. Amuro looked at the station, massive, alien, and somehow less threatening than anything he'd seen in years. These people had tried to talk first. They'd backed him up in a fight that wasn't theirs. And they were asking, not demanding. Maybe, just maybe, this universe was different. I'll come aboard, he said quietly. But the Gundam stays armed. I've been betrayed before. Understood, Sisko replied. We'll guide you to a cargo bay. Welcome to Deep Space Nine, Ensign. And welcome to the Dominion War. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. The cargo bay doors of Deep Space Nine opened like the maw of some great beast, and Amuro guided the Gundam inside with careful precision. The mobile suit's thrusters fired in short, controlled bursts as he maneuvered the 18-meter war machine through the entrance. Warning lights flashed across his console. The Minovsky particles that the Gundam's reactor generated were playing havoc with the station's systems, creating interference patterns that his sensors registered as confused feedback. He set the Gundam down with a heavy metallic thud that resonated through the deck plating. Through his cockpit's panoramic display, he could see figures gathering at the far end of the cargo bay, humanoids in colorful uniforms, keeping a respectful distance. Smart. They didn't know what he was capable of, and he didn't know what they were capable of. Mutual caution was the foundation of survival. Chief O'Brien stood behind a hastily erected force field, tricorder in hand, scanning the mobile suit with growing bewilderment. The energy signature is incredible, he muttered to Dr. Julian Bashir, who stood beside him with medical kit ready. It's generating some kind of exotic particle field that's disrupting our sensors. I can barely get a reading on the pilot, let alone the machine's internal systems. Is it safe to approach? Bashir asked, his genetically enhanced mind already cataloging potential xenobiological threats. I have no idea, O'Brien admitted. But the captain wants us to make first contact, so we're making first contact. Inside the Gundam's cockpit, Amuro ran through shutdown procedures. The fusion reactor powered down to standby mode, the beam rifle's capacitors discharged safely, and the mobile suit systems entered hibernation state. He unsealed his normal suit helmet, not a spacesuit by Federation standards, but close enough, and took a breath of recycled air that tasted like metal and sweat. His hands found the manual release for the cockpit hatch. It hissed open with a hydraulic wheeze, and a ladder extended downward. Amuro climbed down slowly, his body aching from combat stress and the disorienting dimensional transit. When his boots hit the deck plating, he stumbled slightly. The gravity felt wrong, lighter than Earth standard, heavier than a space colony's rotation-generated pull. He was young, O'Brien thought as the force field dropped and they got their first clear look at the pilot. Barely out of his teens, with dark hair and eyes that had seen far too much. The uniform was military but unfamiliar, a white and blue flight suit with Federation markings that meant nothing to anyone in the Alpha Quadrant. And the way he stood, weight balanced, ready to move, this was someone who expected violence at any moment. Ensign Ray, O'Brien said carefully, keeping his hands visible. "I'm Chief Miles O'Brien, this is Dr. Julian Bashir. Captain Sisko is waiting to meet you in Ops, but we wanted to make sure you're physically okay first." Amuro's hand rested near the beam saber hilt on his belt, a weapon these people wouldn't recognize until it was too late. His Newtype senses reached out, probing. The red-uniformed man, O'Brien, felt genuine, concerned, professional. The man in the teal medical uniform radiated curiosity and a desire to help. No hostile intent. No deception he could detect. "I'm fine," Amuro said, his voice flat. "How did your translation system learn Japanese so quickly?" Bashir smiled slightly. "Universal Translator. It analyzes linguistic patterns in real time and creates a translation matrix. Quite useful when you're meeting new species every week." New species. Amuro looked around the cargo bay, really seeing it for the first time. The architecture was completely foreign, curved lines, organic shapes, technology integrated seamlessly into the structure. And the people. O'Brien looked human enough, but his uniform's comm badge was like nothing from the Universal Century. "Where exactly am I?" "That," came a new voice, "is a very complicated question." Captain Benjamin Sisko entered the cargo bay, flanked by Major Kira and Lieutenant Commander Dax. He carried himself with the bearing of a man who'd earned his command through fire, not politics. His eyes took in the Gundam with professional assessment, then focused on Amuro with that particular intensity of someone evaluating a potential ally or threat. "Ensign Amuro Ray," Sisko said, extending his hand. "Welcome to Deep Space Nine. I'm Captain Benjamin Sisko, commanding officer of this station and the USS Defiant." Amuro hesitated, then shook the offered hand. The gesture was familiar. Humans still shook hands in this universe. "Captain. I appreciate you not shooting first and asking questions later." "We try to avoid that when possible," Sisko replied with a slight smile. "Though given the circumstances, I'm glad you were ready to fight. The Dominion doesn't give us much choice these days." He gestured toward the turbolift. "If you'll come with us to Ops, we can begin to figure out what happened to you. And what we're going to do about it." As they walked through the station's corridors, Amuro's trained eye cataloged everything. The technology was advanced, far beyond anything the Earth Federation or Zeon had developed. No visible weapons emplacements, but that meant nothing. The crew members they passed were diverse, not just human, but other species he'd never seen. A tall humanoid with prominent forehead ridges. A being with features that seemed almost feline. A woman whose skin was a pale blue-gray. "You're staring," Dax said gently, falling into step beside him. She had spotted patterns on her face and hands, beautiful, but definitely not human. "I've never seen so many different species in one place," Amuro admitted. "In my universe, we're still fighting each other. Humans, I mean. We haven't encountered any alien life." Kira raised an eyebrow. "You're fighting a civil war." "Was fighting. Am fighting. I don't know anymore." Amuro's jaw tightened. The Earth Federation versus the Principality of Zeon. It started as a war for independence, became a war of extermination. Zeon dropped a space colony on Earth. Billions died in the first week. We've been killing each other in space ever since. The turbolift carried them upward in silence. Sisko exchanged a glance with Dax. This young man had experienced horrors that reminded them uncomfortably of the Dominion War's early days. The casual mention of billions of casualties, delivered with the numb detachment of someone who'd stopped being shocked by atrocity, spoke volumes. Ops was a controlled chaos of activity. Officers manned their stations with the efficient urgency of a wartime posting. The view screen displayed the aftermath of the battle, debris fields being cleared by tractor beams, damaged sections of the station being assessed by repair crews, and in the distance, the Bajoran wormhole pulsing with its mysterious light. "Report," Sisko ordered, moving to the command station. Dax returned to the science station, her fingers flying across the console. "I've been analyzing the spatial rift that brought Ensign Ray here. It's already collapsed, but I managed to get some sensor data before it closed. Benjamin, this wasn't a natural phenomenon. Something punched a hole through subspace, through dimensional barriers we didn't even know existed." "The Minovsky particles," Amuro said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. "In my universe, we use them in combat. They disrupt electromagnetic communications and sensors, force us to fight at close range. But in high concentrations, near certain gravitational anomalies, they can create strange effects. There were rumors of ships disappearing, of space itself becoming unstable." O'Brien was already at the engineering station, running new scans. "Captain, those exotic particles the mobile suit is generating, if those are these Minovsky particles he's talking about, they're interfering with subspace on a fundamental level. It's like they don't quite exist in our reality the same way they did in his." "Which means what, exactly?" Kira asked. "It means," Dax said slowly, "that Ensign Ray's universe and ours operate on slightly different physical principles. The particles that are normal in his reality are anomalous in ours. And if he was caught in a concentration of them during some kind of spatial event." "I got pulled through," Amuro finished. "Like falling through a crack between worlds." Sisko leaned against the command console, thinking. "Can we send him back?" Dax shook her head. "Not without understanding exactly how the rift was created. And even if we could, there's no guarantee we wouldn't make things worse. Dimensional barriers exist for a reason. So I'm stuck here." Amuro had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed still hit like a punch to the gut. White Base. His crewmates. Bright Noah. Salem, Massachusetts, Frau Bau. Everyone he'd fought beside, everyone he'd tried to protect. Gone. In another universe entirely, probably thinking he was dead. "For now," Sisko said carefully. "But the Federation has some of the finest scientific minds in the galaxy. If there's a way to get you home, we'll find it." He paused. "In the meantime, we need to address the immediate situation. You demonstrated capabilities in that mobile suit that frankly terrify me. Weapons that cut through Jem'Hadar shields like they weren't there. Maneuverability that makes our fighters look sluggish. And combat instincts that suggest you've been doing this for a while." "For years," Amuro said. "Since I was 15. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Bashir looked horrified. Kira's expression softened with understanding. She'd been fighting Cardassians since she was a teenager too. Sisko's face remained neutral, but his eyes held a deep sadness. "The Dominion War has been brutal," Sisko said finally. "We're fighting an enemy that uses genetically engineered soldiers, that views conquest as natural law, that won't negotiate in good faith. Every week, I receive casualty reports that make me wonder if we can sustain this. And now you've appeared, with a weapon that could potentially change the tactical balance of this entire conflict." Amuro felt the weight of expectation settling on his shoulders, familiar, crushing, inevitable. "You want me to fight for you?" "I want to understand what you want," Sisko corrected. "This isn't your war. You don't owe the Federation anything. But you're here, in the middle of the largest conflict the Alpha Quadrant has seen in centuries, piloting a mobile weapons platform that just proved its worth against one of our most dangerous enemies. I'd be a fool not to consider what that means. And if I refuse?" "Then you refuse," Sisko said simply. "We're not the Dominion. We don't conscript unwilling soldiers or seize weapons by force. Though I will ask that you allow our engineers to study your mobile suit, with your supervision, so we can understand the technology and its implications for station safety." Amuro studied Sisko's face, his Newtype senses probing for deception. He found none. Just exhaustion, determination, and a bone-deep weariness that came from making impossible choices every day. This was a man who carried the weight of thousands of lives, who'd rather talk than fight, but who would fight when necessary. I'll think about it, Amuro said. But I want to understand this war first. I want to know what I'd be fighting for, or against. I've been lied to before, Captain. I've killed people because I was told they were the enemy, only to learn the truth was more complicated. That's fair, Sisko agreed. Major Kira can brief you on the political situation. Dr. Bashir will want to run some medical scans, purely diagnostic, to make sure the dimensional transit didn't harm you. And Chief O'Brien would very much like to understand how that fusion reactor of yours works without blowing up the station. One more thing, Amuro said, and everyone heard the steel enter his voice. I felt something during the battle. The soldiers in those ships, the Jem'Hadar. Their minds felt wrong. Incomplete. Like they weren't fully alive. Dax and Bashir exchanged troubled glances. Sisko's expression darkened. You're perceptive, Bashir said quietly. The Jem'Hadar are genetically engineered soldiers, created by the founders, the leaders of the Dominion. They're bred in birthing chambers, fully mature in 3 days, and addicted to a drug called Ketracel White that only the founders can provide. They live to serve, fight, and die. They have no choice in the matter. Amuro's hands clenched into fists. Genetically engineered slave soldiers. That's what I'm fighting. That's what your Federation is up against. Yes, Sisko said. And if you think that makes our side automatically righteous, you should know that we've made compromises that would have been unthinkable before this war. We've allied with the Romulans, who we've been enemies with for decades. We've let Section 31, our own Black Ops division, operate with minimal oversight. We've sacrificed principles for survival. At least you admit it, Amuro said. There was something almost refreshing about the honesty. In the Earth Federation, they called us heroes while they covered up the atrocities. They put me in propaganda films while soldiers died because politicians hoarded resources. Kira stepped forward, her voice passionate. Then you understand why we need to win this war. Not for glory, not for territory, but because the alternative is slavery for everyone in the Alpha Quadrant. The founders believe that solids, anyone who isn't a shapeshifter like them, exist only to serve. They'll never stop, never negotiate a real peace. This is a fight for survival. Amuro looked at her, this woman who radiated conviction and barely suppressed fury. She reminded him of the guerrilla fighters he'd encountered on Earth, people who'd lost everything to Zeon and kept fighting anyway. I'll help defend the station, he said finally. If the Dominion attacks again, I'll fight. But beyond that, he met Sisko's eyes. I need time. Time to understand this universe, this war, and whether I'm willing to become a soldier for someone else's cause again. That's all I can ask, Sisko said. He tapped his comm badge. Sisko to Lieutenant Nog. Please prepare guest quarters for Ensign Ray. And coordinate with Chief O'Brien to ensure the cargo bay housing his mobile suit has appropriate security and monitoring. Aye, Captain, came a young voice with an unusual accent. As the briefing continued, discussing logistics and security protocols and scientific analysis, Amuro felt the familiar numbness settling over him. Another war. Another cause. Another battle where people would die and he'd be expected to make the difference. But there was something different here too. These people had principles they struggled to maintain. They questioned themselves. They offered choices instead of orders. Maybe, just maybe, this universe had something his didn't. Maybe here, a soldier could become something more than a weapon. The guest quarters were Spartan but functional, larger than his bunk on White Base, smaller than he'd expected from a station this size. Amuro sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing his normal suit, and stared at his hands. They'd stopped shaking an hour ago, but the phantom sensation of the Gundam's controls remained, muscle memory so deeply ingrained that his fingers twitched with phantom inputs. The door chimed. He tensed instinctively before forcing himself to relax. Come in. Dr. Bashir entered carrying a medical tricorder and what appeared to be a small kit. His expression was professionally friendly, the kind of bedside manner that came naturally to some physicians and felt forced in others. With Bashir, it seemed genuine. "I hope I'm not intruding," Bashir said. "But Captain Sisko asked me to conduct a medical examination. Just to ensure the dimensional transit didn't cause any cellular damage or exotic radiation exposure." "I'm fine," Amuro said automatically, then caught himself. "But I suppose you need to verify that. If you don't mind." Bashir gestured to a chair. "This won't take long. The tricorder is non-invasive, it uses sensor technology to scan your body's biological functions." Amuro sat, watching as Bashir moved the device in slow passes around his head and torso. The doctor's eyebrows rose slightly, then furrowed in concentration. He adjusted the tricorder settings and scanned again. "Interesting," Bashir murmured. "What?" "Your neurological activity is unusual. Significantly higher synaptic firing rates in your parietal and temporal lobes. Enhanced neural pathway development, particularly in areas associated with spatial awareness and pattern recognition." Bashir looked up from the tricorder. "Have you always had enhanced cognitive abilities?" Amuro's jaw tightened. "I'm a Newtype." "A what?" "In my universe, some people who grew up in space, who were born in the colonies or spent their formative years there, developed enhanced abilities. Better spatial awareness, faster reflexes, intuitive understanding of three-dimensional combat. Some of us can even sense other people's emotions and intentions." He paused. "They call us Newtypes. The next stage of human evolution, supposedly." Bashir's enhanced mind was already making connections. Evolved abilities triggered by environmental adaptation. The human brain developing new capacities in response to living in zero-gravity, three-dimensional space. He caught himself, realizing his enthusiasm might seem insensitive. "Does it cause you pain?" "Sometimes." Amuro rubbed his temples. "In combat, I can feel people dying. Their fear, their pain, their last thoughts. It's like they're screaming inside my head. And I keep fighting anyway because that's what soldiers do." The room fell silent. Bashir set down his tricorder and sat across from Amuro, physician to patient, one human to another. "I was genetically enhanced," Bashir said quietly. "When I was 6 years old, my parents had illegal procedures done to increase my intelligence, physical coordination, reaction times. They were afraid I wouldn't be able to compete, that I'd fail in life. For years, I hid what I was because genetic enhancement is illegal in the Federation, too many echoes of the eugenics wars, of Khan Noonien Singh and the Supermen who nearly destroyed Earth." Amuro looked up sharply. "Your own people made you illegal?" "They made the practice illegal. I'm accepted now, but it was complicated." Bashir leaned forward. "What I'm trying to say is that I understand what it's like to be different. To have abilities that set you apart, that make people treat you as something other than human. And I understand what it's like to carry guilt for what those abilities allow you to do. You've killed people." "I've failed to save them," Bashir said. "Which sometimes feels worse." Before Amuro could respond, the door chimed again. Major Kira entered, carrying a PADD and an expression that suggested she was here on official business but would rather be anywhere else. "Ensign Ray," she said formally. "Captain Sisko asked me to brief you on the current strategic situation. If you're willing to listen." "I said I'd learn about this war," Amuro replied. "Might as well start now." Kira activated the PADD, and a holographic display materialized above it, a star map showing the Alpha and Gamma quadrants, with various territories marked in different colors. Red dominated the Gamma quadrant, bleeding into the Alpha quadrant like a hemorrhage. 3 years ago, Kira began, the Dominion made formal contact with the Federation through the Bajoran wormhole. They're a massive empire from the Gamma quadrant, ruled by the founders, shapeshifters who call themselves the Link. They believe that all solid life forms, anyone who isn't a changeling, are inherently chaotic and dangerous. Their solution is to conquer and control. She highlighted a section of space. Their military consists primarily of the Jem'Hadar, genetically engineered soldiers you encountered earlier, and the Vorta, cloned administrators who handle diplomacy and logistics. They've also allied with the Cardassian Union, which gives them a foothold in the Alpha Quadrant. Amuro studied the map. You're outnumbered. By a significant margin, Kira confirmed. The Dominion has virtually unlimited resources from the Gamma Quadrant. They can replace losses faster than we can inflict them. We've formed an alliance with the Klingon Empire, a warrior species, and recently the Romulan Star Empire joined us. But it's still not enough. Why not just destroy the wormhole? Amuro asked. Cut off their supply lines. The wormhole is sacred to my people, Kira said, and her voice carried an edge. The prophets, beings who exist inside it, outside linear time, are central to Bajoran faith. Destroying their temple would be, she struggled for words. It would be unthinkable. Even if it means losing the war. Even then. Kira met his eyes. Some things matter more than survival. Faith. Identity. The things that make us who we are. If we sacrifice everything we believe in to win, then what have we really won? Amuro thought about the Earth Federation, about the ideals they'd claimed to fight for while they made compromises and covered up atrocities. I've heard that argument before. It usually ends with a lot of people dead and those ideals forgotten. Then you understand why we're desperate, Kira said flatly. Why a mobile suit that can destroy Jem'Hadar fighters with single shots matters. Why Captain Sisko is being very careful not to pressure you, but also really hopes you'll help us. I'm one person, Amuro said. One mobile suit. I'm not a miracle. Neither was I, Kira replied. I was just a Bajoran resistance fighter, planting bombs and running from Cardassian patrols. But sometimes one person in the right place at the right time changes everything. She deactivated the PADD. Captain Sisko will respect your decision either way. But you should know what's at stake. After she left, Amuro sat in silence, staring at the walls of his temporary quarters. His Newtype senses reached out, feeling the station around him, thousands of minds, thousands of lives, all existing in this fragile bubble of order surrounded by the vast darkness of space. Some of those minds burned with determination. Others flickered with fear. Many carried the weight of loss. They were just like White Base's crew. Just like every other group of soldiers and civilians thrown together by war's randomness. The door chimed a third time. Amuro was beginning to understand why White Base had manual locks. Come in, he said, expecting another Federation officer with another briefing. Instead, a Ferengi entered, small, with large ears and sharp teeth, wearing a Starfleet uniform that looked slightly uncomfortable on his frame. He carried a toolkit that seemed to weigh almost as much as he did. Ensign Ray, the Ferengi said enthusiastically. I'm Lieutenant Nog, Junior Engineering Officer. Chief O'Brien sent me to escort you to the cargo bay. He said something about wanting to discuss your mobile suit's power systems before they accidentally trigger a warp core breach. He paused. That was a joke. Probably. The chief has a strange sense of humor about catastrophic failures. Despite everything, Amuro felt a slight smile tug at his lips. You're the first non-human I've spoken to directly. Really? Nog's eyes widened. Wow. That must be weird. I mean, not that you're weird, I'm just saying that in the Federation, we're used to dozens of species. Humans, Vulcans, Andorians, Tellarites, Bajorans, even Ferengi like me, though we only joined recently. Well, sort of joined. It's complicated. They walked through the station's corridors, Nog chattering about engineering specifications and Starfleet Academy and something called the Rules of Acquisition that seemed to govern Ferengi culture. Amuro found himself actually listening, grateful for conversation that didn't revolve around war, death, or dimensional physics. The cargo bay was now a study in controlled chaos. Chief O'Brien had erected a network of sensors around the Gundam, each one feeding data to portable workstations where 2 junior engineers were frantically taking notes. The mobile suit stood silent in the center of it all, a white and blue monument to a different kind of warfare. Ensign Ray. O'Brien called out, waving him over. Good, you're here. I've been analyzing your fusion reactor's energy signature, and I have questions. So many questions. Amuro approached cautiously. What kind of questions? O'Brien pulled up a holographic display showing energy readings that looked like a three-dimensional maze of exotic particles. Your reactor doesn't use matter-antimatter annihilation like our warp cores. Instead, it's doing something with hydrogen fusion that shouldn't be possible at that scale. And these Minovsky particles, they're not just interfering with sensors, they're creating localized subspace distortions. It's like your mobile suit exists slightly out of phase with normal space. That's why beam weapons work so well in my universe, Amuro explained. Minovsky particles disrupt electromagnetic radiation, but megaparticle beams can punch through because they're using a different physical principle. And yes, the reactor uses I-field compression to maintain fusion at smaller scales than conventional physics would allow. I-field? Minovsky physics. I don't understand the theory, I'm a pilot, not an engineer. But I know how to maintain the systems and recognize when something's wrong. O'Brien grinned like a child who just discovered a new toy. This is incredible. If we could adapt even a fraction of this technology, he caught himself. Not that we'd steal your mobile suit's technology without permission. That would be wrong. But purely from a theoretical standpoint, the applications for shield technology alone. Chief, Nog interrupted gently. You're doing the thing again. What thing? The thing where you get so excited about technology that you forget other people might have concerns about you dissecting their equipment. O'Brien had the grace to look embarrassed. Right. Sorry, Ensign. Professional enthusiasm. It's a curse. Amuro studied the 2 engineers, one human, one Ferengi, working together with easy camaraderie. In the Earth Federation, aliens were theoretical, something discussed in philosophy classes and science fiction. Here, they were colleagues, friends, just another part of daily life. You can study the Gundam's external systems, Amuro said finally. Scan whatever you want, take sensor readings, analyze the energy signatures. But the cockpit and core systems stay sealed unless I'm there to supervise. The Gundam is a military prototype, there are classified systems I can't let anyone access. Fair enough, O'Brien agreed. Though I should warn you, once word gets out about a mobile weapons platform with technology that defies conventional physics, you're going to have every scientist in the Federation wanting to take a look. Starfleet Command alone will probably send 3 research teams and a tactical analysis group. Let them try, Amuro said. The Gundam is mine. I'm the only one who can pilot it properly, the control system requires Newtype reflexes to operate at full capacity. About that, O'Brien said, his tone shifting to something more serious. The combat data we recorded from your engagement with the Jem'Hadar shows reaction times that are physically impossible for baseline humans. You were dodging attacks before the enemy even fired. How? Amuro's hand unconsciously moved to his temple. Newtype awareness. I can sense intentions, predict movements, perceive threats before they materialize. It's not telepathy exactly, more like intuitive understanding of spatial relationships and other people's mental states. In combat, it gives me an edge. It gives you a massive advantage, O'Brien corrected. Those Jem'Hadar pilots are among the best soldiers in the Dominion. They're bred for warfare, enhanced reflexes, perfect tactical coordination. And you cut through them like they were training dummies. They were also predictable, Amuro said quietly. Their tactics followed standard attack patterns, good patterns, professional, but I've fought the Zeon forces for 4 years. I know how military pilots think, how they coordinate, where they expect their targets to be. And my Newtype senses let me stay one step ahead. Nog was staring at the Gundam with undisguised awe. Can I ask, why does it look humanoid? Wouldn't a more aerodynamic design be more efficient in space combat? Mobile suits are designed for versatility, Amuro explained. We fight in space, on Earth, on the Moon, in colonies. The humanoid form factor allows for operation in multiple environments with the same basic frame. And in close combat, the ability to manipulate weapons, use shields, and employ hand-to-hand techniques gives mobile suits an advantage over conventional fighters. Hand-to-hand techniques? O'Brien repeated incredulously. You're telling me that 18-meter war machine can do karate? Amuro almost smiled. Beam sabers. Melee weapons using megaparticle containment fields. In Minovsky particle saturation, where long-range sensors don't work, mobile suit combat often comes down to close-quarters fighting. The Gundam's design prioritizes agility and combat flexibility. Before O'Brien could launch into another series of questions, an alarm klaxon shrieked through the station. Red alert lights flashed, and Sisko's voice came over the intercom. All hands to battle stations. Long-range sensors detect a Dominion fleet approaching from the Gamma Quadrant. Multiple capital ships, fighter screens, and what appears to be a Vorta diplomatic vessel. They're hailing us. Amuro's entire body tensed, combat instincts taking over. How long until they're in weapons range? 20 minutes, O'Brien said, already moving toward the exit. But if they're hailing us, they might want to talk first. Or they want us distracted while they get into position, Amuro countered. It's what I'd do. Nog looked between the two of them, his expression caught between fear and determination. Should we power up the mobile suit? Amuro was already running toward the Gundam, his hands finding the ladder, his body moving with the automatic precision of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. Get your defenses ready. If they attack, I'll launch immediately. As the cockpit sealed around him and the Gundam systems hummed to life, Amuro felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. Another battle. Another chance to kill or be killed. Another moment where his choices would determine who lived and who died. But this time, he wasn't fighting for the Earth Federation's propaganda machine. He wasn't a symbol or a weapon or a tool for politicians to deploy. This time, he could choose why he fought. And if the Dominion wanted to threaten this station, these people who'd offered him shelter and asked rather than commanded, then they'd learn what the White Devil of the One-Year War could do. The Gundam's eye sensors flared to life, twin points of cold light in the cargo bay's dimness. Let them come. Ops crackled with controlled tension as Captain Sisko stood before the viewscreen, watching the Dominion fleet materialize from the wormhole like predators emerging from deep water. 12 Jem'Hadar fighters formed a protective screen around 2 battlecruisers and a sleek vessel that censored data identified as Vorta design, a diplomatic ship, though in the Dominion's vocabulary, diplomacy and threat assessment were often the same thing. They're maintaining distance, Kira reported from tactical. Just outside standard weapons range. Holding position. Channel open, Captain, Dax confirmed. The viewscreen shifted to display a Vorta, pale skin, violet eyes, an expression of practiced pleasantness that didn't quite reach those cold, calculating eyes. He wore elaborate robes and smiled with the confidence of someone who believed he held all the advantages. Captain Sisko, the Vorta said, his voice smooth as poison. I am Weyoun of the Dominion. How delightful to find you well. The founders send their regards and their curiosity. Weyoun, Sisko replied, his tone neutral. This is an unusual diplomatic approach, arriving with a battle fleet. Should I interpret this as a friendly visit? The founders are concerned, Captain. Reports indicate an unknown vessel engaged our forces near this station several hours ago. A vessel using weapons technology we don't recognize, piloted by someone who destroyed 8 Jem'Hadar fighters with remarkable efficiency. Weyoun's smile widened. The founders are very interested in meeting this individual and in acquiring this technology for proper study. In the cargo bay, Amuro listened to the conversation through the Gundam's communication system, which O'Brien had hastily linked to the station's network. His hands rested on the controls, the mobile suit's reactor at standby power, ready to surge to full combat capability in seconds. The pilot is under Federation protection, Sisko said carefully. As is his vessel. If the Dominion wishes to discuss the incident, we can arrange appropriate diplomatic channels. But I won't hand over a refugee who arrived here by accident. Refugee? Weian's expression shifted to mock sympathy. How noble of you, Captain. But the founders see things differently. This individual possesses weapons that violate several interstellar treaties regarding destructive capacity. His presence near the wormhole, the gateway between our territories, represents a potential security threat. Surely you understand our concern. Daxa's hands moved across her console, analyzing sensor data. She keyed a private channel to Sisko. Benjamin, they're scanning the station. Specifically targeting the cargo bay where the Gundam is housed. The Minovsky particles are interfering, but they're trying to penetrate our shields with multiphasic sensor sweeps. Sisko's jaw tightened. Weian, I'm detecting active scans of this station. That's a violation of the ceasefire protocols established 6 months ago. Power down your sensors or this conversation is over. A misunderstanding, I assure you, Weian said, though he made no move to comply. The founders simply wish to verify that this mysterious pilot poses no threat to Dominion interests. If you would allow our scientists to examine the vessel and interview its operator, I'm certain we could resolve this situation peacefully. Not a chance, Sisko said flatly. Weian's pleasant expression finally cracked, revealing the cold calculation beneath. Captain, you're protecting an unknown entity with technology that could alter the strategic balance of this war. The founders cannot allow such a variable to exist unchecked. You have two options. Surrender the pilot and his vessel for Dominion custody, or we will be forced to take more direct action. In the cargo bay, Amuro felt his Newtype senses flare. Hostile intent, crystallizing into decision. The Jem'Hadar pilots in those fighters, their minds were focusing, preparing for attack orders. They didn't care about diplomacy or negotiations. They existed only to serve, to fight, to kill. He'd felt that kind of single-minded purpose before. Zeon's most fanatical soldiers, the ones who believed in spasinoid supremacy so completely that they'd become living weapons. The Jem'Hadar were worse, they'd been created to be living weapons, with no choice, no hope of being anything else. Chief O'Brien, Amuro said over the comm, open the cargo bay doors. What? O'Brien's voice crackled back. Ensign, the captain hasn't authorized. They're going to attack regardless of what Sisko says. I can feel it. Open the doors or I'll blow them open myself. A pause. Then O'Brien's resigned sigh. Bloody hell. Opening cargo bay doors. Try not to get yourself killed, would you? On the view screen, Sisko was staring down Weian with the kind of cold fury that came from dealing with the Dominion's duplicity for too long. This conversation is over. You have 60 seconds to withdraw to the other side of the wormhole before I interpret your fleet's presence as a hostile act. How unfortunate, Weian said. The founders predicted you would be unreasonable. First Omet carry out your orders. Secure the unknown vessel. Eliminate anyone who interferes. The channel cut off. Immediately, the Jem'Hadar fighters broke formation and accelerated toward the station, their weapon systems powering up with the distinctive energy signature of Polaron beams. The battlecruisers moved into bombardment position, targeting the station's shields. Shields to maximum. Kira shouted. All weapons, free fire authorization. Launch the Defiant. The cargo bay door's iris opened, revealing the star-scattered darkness of space. Amuro's hands moved across the controls with practiced precision, reactor to full power, thrusters online, weapons systems armed. The Gundam's fusion reactor hummed with barely contained energy, Minovsky particles flooding the surrounding space and creating a sensor dead zone that made the Federation's tactical displays flicker with static. RX-78-2 Gundam, Amuro announced over all frequencies. Launching. The mobile suit's thrusters fired in a brilliant burst of white-hot plasma, and the Gundam shot from the cargo bay like a bullet from a gun. 0 to maximum combat velocity in under 3 seconds, acceleration that would have killed an unprotected human, but Amuro's normal suit and the Gundam's inertial dampening field kept him conscious and functional. His Newtype awareness expanded, taking in the battlefield. 8 Jem'Hadar fighters converging on his position. 2 more moving to flank the station. Battlecruisers charging weapons for a bombardment run. And somewhere behind it all, Weyoun's diplomatic vessel, watching, recording, analyzing. The first Jem'Hadar fighter opened fire. Polaron beams converged on the Gundam's projected position, good targeting, professional, exactly where a conventional ship would be. But Amuro felt the attack coming, sensed the firing solution crystallizing in the pilot's mind, and the Gundam was already moving. Thrusters fired in a complex pattern, and the mobile suit corkscrewed through the kill zone untouched. Amuro's beam rifle came up, targeting computer painting solutions faster than human reflexes could process. He fired 3 times in rapid succession. 3 megaparticle beams lanced across space, each one finding a target. 2 Jem'Hadar fighters exploded immediately. The third's shields held just long enough for the pilot to attempt evasive maneuvers before the beam punched through and vaporized the cockpit. 3 down, Amuro muttered, already acquiring new targets. On Deep Space Nine, the Defiant roared from its docking port, Commander Worf at tactical and Commander Jadzia Dax in the pilot's seat. The Starfleet warship's shields flared as it absorbed incoming fire, and its phaser arrays lit up the darkness with return fire. Target the battlecruiser's weapons arrays, Worf ordered. Quantum torpedoes, full spread. The Defiant's torpedoes streaked toward their target, high-yield warheads that detonated against Dominion shields in cascades of exotic energy. The battlecruiser's shields buckled, and phaser fire exploited the weakness, carving molten wounds across the hull. But the Jem'Hadar were adapting. The remaining fighters split into 2 groups, 3 moved to engage the Defiant, while 2 accelerated toward the Gundam with their weapons configured for maximum firepower. They'd analyzed Amuro's combat pattern, recognized his ability to dodge predictable attacks, and shifted to saturation fire tactics. Polaron beams crisscrossed space in a deadly lattice, creating overlapping fields of fire that left nowhere to dodge. Amuro felt the trap closing, felt the pilot's grim satisfaction as they executed a maneuver designed specifically to counter his enhanced reflexes. So he stopped trying to dodge. The Gundam's shield, a massive slab of Luna titanium alloy mounted on the mobile suit's left arm, snapped up into defensive position. Polaron beams hammered into it, and for a moment the shield's surface glowed white-hot from the energy absorption. The Gundam's armor groaned under the stress, warning lights flashing across Amuro's console. But Luna titanium held. And while the Jem'Hadar pilots were focused on maintaining their fire pattern, Amuro switched weapons. His right hand released the beam rifle, letting it drift in space, and drew a beam saber from the Gundam's hip mount. The weapon ignited with a brilliant pink-white flare, a blade of contained megaparticles that could cut through almost anything. The Gundam's thrusters fired at maximum power. The mobile suit shot forward through the storm of Polaron fire, shield-absorbing hits that would have destroyed any conventional vessel. Distance closed in seconds. The Jem'Hadar fighters tried to break formation, but they were too slow, their ships designed for space superiority not knife-fighting range. Amuro's beam saber slashed through the first fighter like it was paper. The blade's megaparticle field disrupted the ship's structural integrity on a molecular level, and the fighter split in 2, internal atmosphere venting in frozen crystals. The second fighter managed to roll away from the initial strike, but Amuro's Newtype reflexes predicted the maneuver. The Gundam pivoted, thrusters firing in a precise sequence, and the beam saber came around in a devastating backhand slash. Another explosion. Another life extinguished in the cold mathematics of combat. 5 down, Amuro said, his voice flat. Emotionless. The combat trance that every experienced pilot learned, the place where you stop thinking and let training and instinct take over, because thinking about what you were doing would drive you insane. The remaining 3 fighters broke off their engagement with the Defiant and regrouped, creating a defensive formation around the battlecruisers. They'd learned. These weren't mindless drones, the Jem'Hadar were skilled soldiers who adapted quickly. They wouldn't make the same mistakes twice. Ensign Ray, Worf's voice crackled over the comm, the battlecruisers are charging their main weapons. They're targeting the station's reactor core. If those shots connect, the damage will be catastrophic. Amuro's hands tightened on the controls. The battlecruisers were massive, easily 10 times the Gundam size, with shields that had withstood the Defiant's quantum torpedoes. His beam rifle had maybe 12 shots left. Not enough to penetrate capital ship shields and destroy 2 targets. Unless he didn't try to penetrate the shields. Defiant, I need you to draw their fire, Amuro said. Get them focused on you for 30 seconds. 30 seconds, Dax's voice replied. Worf, he has a plan. Let's give him his window. The Defiant accelerated toward the battlecruisers, phasers firing in sustained bursts. It was a suicide run by any conventional tactical assessment, deliberately exposing the ship to capital ship weapons to create a distraction. But Worf trusted the mobile suit pilot's capabilities, and Dax had learned to trust Worf's tactical instincts. Both battlecruisers rotated to track the Defiant, their primary weapons arrays glowing with building energy. The Jem'Hadar fighters moved to intercept, creating a screen between the Gundam and the capital ships. Amuro's Newtype senses expanded, taking in the entire battlefield. He felt the Jem'Hadar pilots' positions, their attack vectors, the timing of their coordination. He felt the battlecruiser crew's focus shift to the Defiant. And he felt the exact moment when their attention wavered. The Gundam's thrusters fired at emergency overload. The mobile suit shot forward with acceleration that redlined every safety system, pushing the fusion reactor to 90% maximum output. Warning klaxons screamed in the cockpit, but Amuro ignored them. Speed was survival. Speed was victory. He dropped the shield, drew the beam rifle in mid-flight, and fired 6 times in 3 seconds. Not at the fighters. Not at the shields. At the battlecruiser's external weapons arrays. The megaparticle beam struck the massive turrets before the shields could compensate for targets that close to the hull. Explosions rippled across the battlecruiser's surface as energy conduits overloaded and ammunition stores detonated. The ship's main weapons went dark, catastrophic damage spreading through its offensive systems. The Gundam didn't slow down. Worf didn't hesitate. Fire quantum torpedoes, full spread. 6 torpedoes streaked across space and slammed into the unprotected battlecruiser. The warheads detonated in sequence, each explosion feeding into the next, until the entire ship was engulfed in a cascading chain reaction. When the light faded, only debris remained. The second battlecruiser immediately began withdrawing, its captain recognizing a losing battle. The remaining Jem'Hadar fighters maintained their defensive formation, covering the retreat with disciplined precision. They wouldn't win, but they'd make any pursuit costly. Amuro considered chasing them. His beam rifle had 6 shots left. He could probably destroy 2 more fighters before they escaped. But the pilots were just following orders, just doing what they'd been programmed to do from birth. Killing them now wouldn't change anything. He let them go. Dominion forces are withdrawing through the wormhole, Kira reported from Ops. They're not even trying to recover their dead. They never do, Sisko said quietly. To the Dominion, soldiers are resources, not people. When the resource is expended, you simply create more. He tapped his comm badge. Ensign Ray, return to the station. Well done. Amuro guided the Gundam back toward the cargo bay, his body aching from combat stress and the emotional exhaustion that always followed battle. 7 Jem'Hadar fighters destroyed. 1 battlecruiser crippled, then destroyed by the Defiant. Probably 200 Jem'Hadar dead. 200 genetically engineered slaves who'd never had a choice about what they were or what they did. He'd killed them anyway. Because that's what soldiers do. As the Gundam settled into the cargo bay and the doors sealed behind him, Amuro powered down the mobile suit systems and sat in the darkness of the cockpit, listening to the reactor's cooling cycle and the distant sounds of the station's damage control teams assessing the battle's aftermath. His hands were shaking again. They always did, after. The wardroom was quieter than Amuro expected for a post-battle briefing. Captain Sisko sat at the head of the table, his expression thoughtful rather than triumphant. Major Kira stood by the viewport, arms crossed, staring out at the repair crews working on the station's damaged sections. Commander Worf occupied a seat with perfect military posture, while Dax reviewed tactical data on a PADD. Dr. Bashir had insisted on being present, medical kit conspicuously placed beside him. Amuro sat at the far end of the table, still wearing his normal suit, feeling distinctly out of place among these Starfleet officers with their color-coded uniforms and easy camaraderie born from years of serving together. He'd been on the station for less than 12 hours, and he'd already fought 2 battles. Just like White Base. Just like the war he thought he'd escaped. Casualty report, Sisko said, breaking the silence. Kira turned from the viewport. 2 injured on the station, plasma burns from a shield overload in Section 7. Both stable, Bashir's team is treating them. The Defiant took moderate damage to port shields and minor hull scoring. Chief O'Brien estimates 8 hours for repairs. And the Dominion? 7 fighters destroyed, 1 battlecruiser destroyed, 1 heavily damaged and retreated. Kira's voice was professionally neutral, but Amuro heard something underneath, not quite satisfaction, but grim acknowledgement. Estimated casualties, 180 to 200 Jem'Hadar, plus Vorta and Founder support personnel on the battlecruiser. Worf spoke, his deep voice carrying a warrior's respect. Ensign Ray's combat performance was exemplary. His mobile suit's capabilities exceed initial projections. The Jem'Hadar adapted their tactics twice during the engagement, and he countered both adaptations with minimal difficulty. Those pilots were good, Amuro said quietly. Professional, coordinated, disciplined. They just weren't used to fighting mobile suits. In my universe, space combat evolved around Minovsky particle warfare, close range, high maneuverability, 3-dimensional tactics. Your people fight at longer ranges with different weapons. The Jem'Hadar's training didn't prepare them for knife fighting. Nevertheless, Worf continued, you demonstrated skills that would be valuable to Starfleet tactical doctrine. The concept of close-quarters space combat using maneuverable platforms has applications we haven't fully explored. Sisko raised a hand, forestalling further tactical discussion. Ensign Ray, you defended this station and saved lives. For that, you have my gratitude and the Federation's. But we need to discuss what happens next, because Weyoun's visit wasn't random. The Dominion now knows you exist, knows your capabilities, and based on their attempt to capture you, they consider you a strategic asset worth significant risk. Or a threat worth eliminating, Dax added. She looked at Amuro with those ancient eyes that had seen 8 lifetimes of complications. The Founders don't tolerate variables they can't control. You represent unknown technology, unknown capabilities, and you've now publicly humiliated them by destroying their forces twice in one day. They'll come back. Let them, Amuro said, and heard the exhaustion in his own voice. I've been fighting since I was 15. One more enemy doesn't change much. It should, Bashir interjected, leaning forward with the intensity of a doctor who'd seen too many soldiers break under sustained combat stress. Amuro, may I call you Amuro? You're exhibiting classic symptoms of combat fatigue. Emotional numbing, dissociation from the act of killing, tremors in your hands even now. You need rest, not another battle. I'll rest when I'm dead, Amuro replied flatly, then caught himself at Bashir's expression. That's not, I didn't mean. I know what you meant, Bashir said gently. I've heard it from 100 soldiers who thought they had to keep fighting because stopping would mean confronting what they'd done. But you're not in your universe anymore, Amuro. You don't have to be a weapon here. Don't I? Amuro looked around the table. You need soldiers. This Dominion war is grinding you down, Captain Sisko said so himself. And I'm good at killing. It's what I was trained for, what my Newtype abilities make me perfect for. Why pretend I'm anything else? The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Kira was the one who broke it, her voice carrying hard-earned wisdom. I was a terrorist, she said. That's what the Cardassians called me, and technically they were right. I planted bombs in public places. I killed soldiers and civilians. I watched friends die and kept fighting because I thought the cause mattered more than the cost. She moved to sit across from Amuro. And when the occupation ended, when we'd actually won, I had to figure out how to be something other than a weapon. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. Did you succeed? Amuro asked. Most days, Kira admitted. Some days I'm still that scared kid with a phaser and too much anger. But I'm also a Starfleet officer, a friend, a person who has a life beyond fighting. You can be that too. Not while the war continues, Amuro said. Not while people die and I could have prevented it. Sisko stood, walking to the viewport to stand beside where Kira had been. Ensign Ray, I'm going to be direct with you. Starfleet Command will want you in your mobile suit. They'll frame it as necessity, as strategic advantage, as the only way to save lives in this brutal war. And they'll be right, your Gundam could change tactical calculations across multiple fronts. But they'll also be wrong, because using you that way means treating you as a weapon rather than a person. He turned to face Amuro. I won't do that. I won't order you into combat. I won't pressure you to fight battles that aren't yours. But I will ask you to consider what you want your life to be, here in this universe where you have no obligations to anyone except yourself. I want, Amuro started, then stopped. What did he want? To go home, but that was impossible. To stop fighting, but he didn't know how to do anything else. To not feel responsible for every death that happened because he wasn't there to prevent it. I don't know. Then figure it out, Sisko said. Take time. Talk to people. Explore the station. The Dominion won't attack again immediately, Weian will need to report to the Founders, analyze the data, develop new tactics. You have a window of peace. Use it. Before Amuro could respond, the door chimed and Odo entered, the station's security chief, a changeling who served the Federation despite being the same species as the Founders. Amuro's Newtype senses recoiled from Odo's presence, unable to properly perceive someone who had no fixed form, no stable emotional signature. Captain, Odo said, his voice gravelly and perpetually suspicious. I need to speak with Ensign Ray. Alone, if possible. Sisko's eyebrows rose. This is about the battle. No. This is about what he is. Odo's gaze fixed on Amuro with uncomfortable intensity. I sensed something during the fighting. Something I need to understand. The room cleared with minimal discussion, though Bashir gave Amuro a concerned look before departing. Soon it was just Amuro and Odo, security chief and dimensional refugee, staring at each other across the wardroom table. You felt me, Odo said. It wasn't a question. During the battle, when you were dodging attacks that hadn't been fired yet. You felt the Jem'Hadar's intentions. Their thoughts. My Newtype abilities, Amuro confirmed warily. Enhanced spatial awareness, emotional perception, predictive reflexes. It's genetic evolution triggered by space colonization in my universe. I am a changeling, Odo said. A shapeshifter. In my natural state, I exist as liquid, no fixed form, no rigid molecular structure. When I am in the Great Link with my people, I share consciousness directly, thoughts and emotions flowing together without barrier or boundary. He leaned forward. What you described, this new type awareness, sounds remarkably similar to how changelings perceive the universe. As if you're touching something fundamental that most solids never experience. Amuro felt his breath catch. You're saying my abilities are like your shape-shifting? No. I'm saying they might represent the same evolutionary direction approached from different biology. Humans developing enhanced consciousness. Changelings developing enhanced form. Both reaching towards something that transcends baseline existence. Odo's expression was unreadable. The founders believe that solids, fixed-form beings, are inherently limited, chaotic, dangerous. They use that belief to justify conquest and control. But if humans in your universe are naturally evolving toward expanded consciousness, it means they're wrong, Amuro finished. It means solids aren't inherently inferior. We're just different. Exactly. Odo stood, his posture rigid in the way of someone uncomfortable with profound implications. The founders will want to study you. Not just for your mobile suit's technology, but for what your existence represents. A solid who can perceive reality the way changelings do, who can sense intent and emotion and spatial relationships with impossible precision. You're proof that their fundamental philosophy is flawed. That makes me dangerous to them. Extremely. Odo moved toward the door, then paused. Be careful, Ensign Ray. The founders are not above assassination when they perceive existential threats. And you, whether you realize it or not, threaten the very foundation of the Dominion's ideology. After Odo left, Amuro sat alone in the wardroom, processing everything. He'd fought battles, made tactical decisions, killed enemy soldiers, all familiar territory. But this philosophical dimension, this idea that his existence challenged the Dominion's core beliefs, was something entirely new. The door chimed again. Amuro almost didn't respond, exhausted by conversations and revelations, but curiosity won out. Come in. Nog entered, carrying 2 steaming mugs and looking uncharacteristically serious for someone usually so enthusiastic. I brought Raktajino. It's Klingon coffee, strong enough to wake the dead, Chief O'Brien says. Thought you might need it. Amuro accepted the mug, surprised by the gesture. Thanks. Nog sat down uninvited, ears twitching nervously. I watched the battle from the engineering station. You were incredible. Terrifying, but incredible. Those moves, that precision, I've never seen anything like it. I've had a lot of practice. That's what worries me, Nog said quietly. You fight like someone who's been doing it forever. Like it's the only thing you know how to do. He met Amuro's eyes. I joined Starfleet because I wanted to prove Ferengi could be more than merchants and profiteers. Uncle Quark thinks I'm crazy, throwing away profit for principles. But I wanted to be part of something that mattered, something bigger than myself. Why are you telling me this? Because you look like you've forgotten why you fight, Nog said. You're good at it, maybe the best I've ever seen. But you don't seem to enjoy it, or hate it, or feel anything about it. You're just doing it. Like a machine. Amuro's hands tightened around the mug. What else should I be? Human, Nog said simply. Person. Someone who fights because they choose to, not because they don't know how to do anything else. He stood up. Chief O'Brien wants to show you the station's recreational facilities tomorrow, Holosuits, Quark's Bar, the promenade. Maybe spend some time not being a soldier. See what happens. After Nog left, Amuro remained in the wardroom, drinking the too strong coffee and staring at his reflection in the viewport. The young man looking back at him seemed older than 19, with eyes that had seen too much and hands that had killed too often. When had he stopped being Amuro Ray and become just the Gundam's pilot? When had his identity merged so completely with his mobile suit that he couldn't imagine existing without it? His combadge chirped. O'Brien had given him one earlier, linking him to the station's communication network. Ensign Ray, this is Ops. We're receiving a priority transmission from Starfleet Command. Admiral Ross wants to speak with you directly. Amuro closed his eyes. And so it begins. Route it to the wardroom, he said quietly. The view screen activated, displaying a gray-haired human in an admiral's uniform, his expression carefully neutral but his eyes sharp with intelligence and calculation. This was someone who made strategic decisions that determined the fates of thousands, and he was looking at Amuro like a chess piece whose value needed to be assessed. Ensign Amuro Ray, Admiral Ross said. I've reviewed the combat reports from Deep Space Nine. Your capabilities are remarkable, and your mobile suit represents technology that could potentially alter this war's trajectory. Starfleet would like to extend an official invitation for you to join our forces as a tactical specialist. And if I refuse? Amuro asked. Then you refuse, Ross replied. We're not the Dominion. We don't conscript or coerce. But I hope you'll consider the implications of your choice. Every day this war continues, people die. Soldiers, civilians, entire species caught between the Dominion's expansion and our desperate defense. If your abilities and your mobile suit could save even a fraction of those lives. You want me to be a weapon, Amuro said flatly. A strategic asset deployed where casualties are highest. I want you to be a soldier fighting for something that matters, Ross countered. The Federation isn't perfect, we've made mistakes, compromises, decisions that haunt me. But we're fighting for the principle that all sentient beings deserve freedom, autonomy, the right to determine their own futures. The Dominion offers only servitude or extinction. If you can help us prevent that, isn't that worth fighting for? Amuro thought about the Jem'Hadar, genetically engineered slaves with no choice about their existence. He thought about Weyoun's cold calculation, treating soldiers as expendable resources. He thought about the Founders' ideology that justified conquest and control. And he thought about the Earth Federation, which had claimed to fight for humanity's future while it covered up atrocities and used child soldiers as propaganda tools. I need time, Amuro said. To understand this war, these people, what I'm really agreeing to. I won't commit to fighting without knowing the full truth. Admiral Ross studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Fair enough. Captain Sisko speaks highly of your judgment. I'll trust his assessment. He leaned forward. But Ensign Ray, understand this, the Dominion won't give you time to make a leisurely decision. They'll come for you, and when they do, you'll have to choose whether to fight or run. I hope you choose wisely. The transmission ended, leaving Amuro alone with his thoughts and too many questions. Outside the viewport, the stars burned cold and distant, indifferent to human struggles and philosophical debates about the nature of war. Somewhere out there, the Dominion was regrouping, planning, adapting. And here on Deep Space Nine, a 19-year-old soldier from another universe had to decide what kind of person he wanted to be. If he even had a choice. The promenade was unlike anything Amuro had experienced in the sterile military vessels and space colonies of his universe. It was chaos-given architecture, a multi-level marketplace where dozens of species mingled, bartered, argued, and laughed. The air smelled of exotic foods, recycled atmosphere, and something indefinably organic. Shops lined the walkways, their contents ranging from practical supplies to incomprehensible alien artifacts. And everywhere, people lived their lives as if a massive interstellar war wasn't grinding away at the galaxy's edges. Welcome to civilization, Chief O'Brien said, guiding Amuro through the crowd with the confidence of someone who'd learned to navigate this controlled chaos. Or Quark's version of it, anyway. The promenade is where the station really comes alive. Traders, refugees, off-duty personnel, locals from Bajorans. Everyone ends up here eventually. Amuro watched a Klingon haggle with a Balian merchant over what appeared to be a crate of questionable weaponry. Two Bajorans argued passionately about religious interpretation near a shrine. A group of Starfleet officers laughed at a table outside an establishment with a garish sign reading, Quark's Bar. Everywhere he looked, life continued despite the war, despite the death, despite everything. How do they do it? Amuro asked. How do they just live? Like the fighting doesn't matter? O'Brien stopped, considering the question seriously. Because if we stop living, the Dominion wins even if we survive the war. Life isn't what happens after the fighting, it's what we're fighting for. He gestured toward a holosuit entrance. Come on. I promised the chief I'd show you something that might help you understand. The holosuit door sealed behind them, and reality dissolved into light and reformation. When the world solidified again, Amuro stood in what appeared to be an ancient Irish pub, wooden beams, stone fireplace, the smell of beer and old wood. Acoustic music played from somewhere, and a handful of patrons occupied the tables, though Amuro's Newtype senses told him they weren't real, just sophisticated holographic constructs. This is my place, O'Brien said, moving behind the bar with practiced ease. Well, not real, just a holo program. But it's where I come when I need to remember that there's more to existence than plasma conduits and tactical readouts. My home in Ireland, before I joined Starfleet. Before the war. He poured 2 glasses of what looked like whiskey and slid one across the bar to Amuro. You don't have to drink it. But you should at least hold it. Feels more human that way. Amuro accepted the glass, feeling the weight of it, the cool smoothness of the holographic crystal. Why are you showing me this? Because Nog was right, O'Brien said. You've forgotten how to be a person. And I've seen that happen before, soldiers so deep in the fight that they can't imagine a world where they're not fighting. Some of them die in battle. The ones who survive often wish they hadn't. I'm a new type, Amuro said quietly. I can feel people dying. Every battle, every kill, their fear, their pain, their last thoughts. It's like they're screaming inside my head. How am I supposed to just turn that off and pretend life is normal? You're not, O'Brien replied. You're supposed to carry it, acknowledge it, and find ways to keep living despite it. That's what soldiers do when they come home, they learn to integrate the horror into themselves without letting it consume everything else. But I haven't come home. I'm stuck in another universe, probably forever, fighting another war that isn't even mine. Then make it yours, O'Brien said. Not because someone ordered you to, but because you chose to. Because you looked at what the Dominion represents and decided it's worth opposing. Or don't, walk away, find some quiet colony, live out your life in peace. But either way, make a choice that's yours, not one that's been made for you by circumstances or guilt or the expectation that you'll be what everyone needs you to be. Before Amuro could respond, the holosuit door chimed, an intrusion of reality into the simulated peace. O'Brien sighed and called out, "Enter." Lieutenant Commander Dax materialized in the Irish pub, looking distinctly out of place but grinning with that particular enthusiasm she brought to new experiences. Sorry to interrupt, but Captain Sisko asked me to find you. We've received an interesting visitor, a Cardassian defector with information about Dominion movements. And he specifically asked to meet Ensign Ray. Amuro's combat instincts flared immediately. Why me? That's what makes it interesting, Dax said. Come on, the debriefing is in one of the secure conference rooms. This should be educational. The conference room was deliberately Spartan, no windows, heavy security, dampening fields that prevented any electronic surveillance. The Cardassian who waited inside was thin for his species, with the distinctive neck ridges and facial structure Amuro had learned to recognize from station briefings. He wore civilian clothing, but his bearing was military, and his eyes held the calculating intelligence of a professional spy. Ensign Amuro Ray, the Cardassian said in accented but fluent Federation standard. I am Corbin in Tech, formerly of the Obsidian Order, Cardassia's intelligence service. I defected 3 weeks ago when the Order was destroyed by a Dominion counterstrike. I've been providing tactical intelligence to Starfleet in exchange for asylum. Sisko sat at the table, Kira standing behind him with arms crossed and an expression of deep suspicion. She'd fought Cardassians for years and didn't trust easily. Odo occupied a corner, his shapeshifter's awareness focused entirely on the defector. Mr. Intech claims to have information about Dominion interest in your mobile suit, Sisko said. Information, he says, is time-sensitive. I thought you should hear it directly. Intech activated a holographic display showing what appeared to be intercepted Dominion communications. The founders have designated your mobile suit as a Category 1 strategic threat. They've authorized Weyown to acquire or eliminate it using any necessary resources. But more interestingly, they've reached out to potential allies who might have expertise in countering your capabilities. The display shifted to show technical schematics, mobile weapons platforms that looked disturbingly similar to mobile suits, but with design aesthetics that suggested different engineering principles. Amuro leaned forward, his tactical mind automatically analyzing the designs. What am I looking at? He asked. Cardassian experimental weapons, Intech replied. Prototype mobile armor units developed during the occupation of Bajorans. We called them warbuds, humanoid combat platforms designed for urban pacification and resistance suppression. They were never deployed operationally due to political complications, but the technology exists. Kira's expression darkened. You were building giant war machines to crush the resistance. Among other applications, Intech said without apology. The Obsidian Order believed that mobile armor technology represented the future of asymmetric warfare. But the designs were abandoned when the Dominion Alliance was formed. The founders saw no need for such platforms when Jem'Hadar could accomplish the same objectives. Until now, Dax interjected, understanding dawning in her ancient eyes. Until they encountered a mobile suit and realized the tactical advantages. Now they want to resurrect the program and use it against us. Precisely, Intech confirmed. The Dominion has approached certain Cardassian engineers who worked on the Warbird project. They're offering substantial resources and political favors in exchange for accelerated development of combat-capable units. My sources indicate they plan to have at least 3 operational prototypes within 2 months. Amuro's hands clenched into fists. They're going to build mobile suits to counter mine. To hunt you specifically, Intech corrected. The founders view your mobile suit as an anomaly that must be eliminated or controlled. They can't allow you to continue operating freely, demonstrating that a single pilot in an advanced platform can threaten their tactical superiority. So they'll match your capabilities and overwhelm you with numbers. Why are you telling us this? Odo demanded, his gravelly voice cutting through the implications. What do you gain from warning us about Dominion plans? Intech's smile was thin and calculating. Because I want to survive, and the Dominion's victory means Cardassia becomes a permanent client state. I'd rather see them defeated, even if it means helping the Federation. And because, he looked directly at Amuro. I have something you need. Technical specifications for the Warbird prototypes. Design schematics, performance parameters, tactical doctrine. Everything necessary to counter them when they deploy. In exchange for what? Sisko asked. Asylum for my family, Intech said. My wife and daughter are still on Cardassia Prime, in danger because of my defection. I want them extracted and given Federation protection. In return, I'll provide complete intelligence on the Warbird project and continue to serve as a consultant on Cardassian military capabilities. Kira looked like she wanted to refuse on principle, but Sisko held up a hand. I'll discuss the extraction operation with Starfleet intelligence. If we can verify your intelligence and confirm your family's identities, we'll consider your terms. Fair enough, Intech said. He stood, nodding to Amuro. One more thing, Ensign. The lead engineer on the Warbird project is named Tokmer. He's brilliant, ruthless, and personally offended that his designs were shelved. He sees your mobile suit as validation of his life's work, and he will not rest until his creations have proven themselves against yours. When you face the Warbuds, you'll be facing a man who has studied every second of your combat footage and designed his machine specifically to kill you. After Intech was escorted to secure quarters, the room fell silent. Amuro stared at the Warbird schematics, his engineering knowledge, limited as it was, recognizing the fundamental design principles. These weren't copies of the Gundam. They were parallel developments, mobile armor platforms that approached the same problems from different directions. They'll be slower, he said, analyzing the thruster configurations. But probably better armored. The weapon systems look like adapted Cardassian disruptors, less raw power than my beam rifle, but potentially higher rates of fire. Can you defeat them? Sisko asked. 3 against 1. In open space, maybe. In close quarters or urban environments, it becomes much harder. Amuro looked up from the schematics. Captain, you need to understand something about mobile suit combat. It's not like starship battles where superior firepower and shields determine victory. It's about pilot skill, spatial awareness, predicting your opponent's movements. And if these Cardassian pilots have been training specifically to counter my tactics. You're saying you might lose, Dax finished. I'm saying it'll be the first fair fight I've had since arriving in this universe, Amuro replied. Every battle so far, I've had the advantage of superior technology and enemies who didn't understand mobile suit combat doctrine. The warbuds changed that equation. Suddenly I'm facing opponents who know what I can do and have platforms designed to counter it. Worf spoke, his tactical mind already working through implications. If the Dominion deploys these warbuds, they will not only target you. They will use them as shock troops against critical objectives, space stations, orbital installations, planetary defense platforms. Anywhere a small, highly mobile unit can create disproportionate damage. Like DS9, Kira said grimly. Exactly. Worf pulled up strategic maps showing Dominion-controlled territory. If they position warbuds at key locations, they can threaten multiple Federation assets simultaneously. We would need to divide our forces to counter them, weakening our overall defensive posture. Unless we have our own mobile suits, O'Brien said thoughtfully. Everyone turned to look at him. What? I'm just saying, if Ensign Ray's Gundam is so effective, why not build our own? We have the combat data, we could analyze the basic principles, develop Federation variants. No, Amuro said sharply. Everyone stared at him. You don't understand what you're proposing. Mobile suit development in my universe led to an arms race that killed billions. Colony drops, nuclear weapons, wholesale slaughter. And it all started because someone thought they could control a technology designed for war. You build mobile suits, the Dominion builds more. The Klingon demand them for honor's sake. The Romulans steal the designs. Within 5 years, every faction in the galaxy is deploying mobile weapons platforms, and space combat becomes exponentially more lethal. But you fight in one, Kira pointed out. You use that technology. Because it exists, Amuro said. Because the Gundam was built, and Zeon built Zaku's, and the Earth Federation built GM's, and once that process started, it couldn't be stopped. But in this universe, that door is still closed. You don't want to open it. Sisko considered this carefully. You're asking us to fight the Dominion's warbuds without matching their capabilities. That puts us at a severe disadvantage. It puts you where you've always been, Amuro countered. Fighting with the tools and principles you already have. Starships, fighters, tactical doctrine that emphasizes coordination over individual superiority. The Federation doesn't need mobile suits, it needs to stay true to what makes it effective. Pretty words, Odo said dryly. But when those warbuds attack this station, I doubt philosophy will stop them. No, Amuro admitted. But I will. That's what I'm trying to tell you, let me be the counter to their mobile armor program. Don't create more weapons, just use the one you already have. Me and the Gundam. You're volunteering, Dax said, surprise evident in her voice. Amuro nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the decision settle onto his shoulders, familiar, crushing, inevitable. Chief O'Brien said I should make a choice that's mine. So here it is. I'll fight for Deep Space Nine. I'll defend this station and its people against the Dominion. And when those warbuds deploy, I'll I'll face them. But I won't help you build more weapons. I won't be part of starting another arms race. Sisko stood, extending his hand across the table. Then welcome to the war, Ensign Ray. I wish I could say it's a good decision, but honestly, I'm not sure any decision made in wartime is truly good. We just choose the option we can live with and hope we're right. As Amuro shook the captain's hand, his Newtype senses flared with a sudden, overwhelming premonition, danger approaching, violence crystallizing from potential into certainty, death arriving on scheduled vectors. His combat instincts screamed a warning half a second before the station's alarm klaxons began to wail. Red alert, came the announcement. All hands to battle stations. Dominion fleet emerging from the wormhole. Multiple capital ships, fighter screens, and 3 unknown signatures. Repeat, 3 unknown signatures. On the conference room's display, sensor data materialized showing the approaching threat. 2 battlecruisers, 8 fighters, and 3 contacts that registered as mobile humanoid platforms approximately 18 meters tall. The warbirds had arrived ahead of schedule. And Amuro Ray was about to face opponents designed specifically to kill him. The cargo bay was controlled chaos. Chief O'Brien shouted orders to his engineering team while Lieutenant Nog ran pre-flight diagnostics on the Gundam systems. Amuro sprinted across the deck, his normal suit already sealed, his mind shifting into the cold clarity of combat readiness that had kept him alive through 4 years of war. Status, he barked, reaching the Gundam's ladder. Reactors at 90%, Nog called back, his fingers flying across a portable console. Beam rifle fully charged, 12 shots. Vulcan guns loaded, beam sabers operational, shield integrity at 100%. You're good to launch, but Ensign, those 3 contacts are moving like they know what they're doing. They should, Amuro said, climbing into the cockpit. They were designed to kill me. The cockpit sealed with its familiar hiss, and the panoramic display flickered to life. Amuro's hands found the controls with automatic precision, muscle memory overriding conscious thought. Systems initialized in sequence, reactor output climbing, Minovsky particles flooding the surrounding space, sensors calibrating to compensate for the interference his own mobile suit generated. On the command frequency, Sisko's voice came through with controlled urgency. Ensign Ray, we're tracking the 3 mobile armor platforms. They're moving to engage you directly while the Dominion fleet targets the station. The Defiant is launching to provide support, but those platforms are your primary responsibility. Understood, Amuro replied, his voice flat and professional. The combat trance was settling over him now, emotions pushed aside in favor of pure tactical calculation. What's their weapons configuration? Dax's voice replaced Sisko's. Sensor analysis shows directed energy weapons similar to Cardassian disruptors, projectile systems that might be microtorpedo launchers, and what appears to be some kind of melee weapon capability. Their armor is reading as Kellandite composite, not as strong as your Luna titanium, but more than adequate against conventional weapons. Speed and maneuverability. Slightly slower than your mobile suit based on thruster output, but they're compensating with coordinated attack patterns. Amuro, these pilots know what they're doing. They're not attacking individually, they're moving as a unit. Of course they were. Tokmer had studied his combat footage, recognized that Amuro's greatest advantage was outmaneuvering opponents who fought as individuals. So the Cardassian engineer had designed his warbirds to fight as a coordinated team, each platform covering the other's weaknesses. Opening cargo bay doors, O'Brien announced. Good hunting, Ensign. The doors irised open, revealing the star-scattered darkness beyond. The Dominion fleet hung in space like a promise of death, battlecruisers with weapons arrays glowing, fighters forming attack screens, and 3 humanoid silhouettes that moved with the unmistakable grace of piloted mobile armor. RX-78-2 Gundam, Amuro announced. Launching. The thrusters fired, and the Gundam shot from the cargo bay with explosive acceleration. 0 to maximum velocity in under 3 seconds, the fusion reactor screaming with barely contained energy. Amuro's Newtype awareness expanded, taking in the battlefield with senses that transcended normal human perception. The warbuds were beautiful in a lethal way, angular where the Gundam was curved, dark red and bronze where his mobile suit was white and blue. They moved with coordinated precision, their thruster patterns suggesting pilots who trained together, who thought as a unit. And they were heading straight for him. Unknown mobile platform, a voice crackled over the open channel, Cardassian accent, male, dripping with professional anticipation. I am Ghoul Rivek, leader of the Warbird Squadron. In the name of the Dominion, surrender your mobile suit for inspection or be destroyed. I've heard that before, Amuro replied. It didn't work out well for the people who said it. We're not Jem'Hadar cannon fodder, Rivek said. We've studied you, Ensign Ray. Every movement, every tactic, every predictable pattern. Your Newtype abilities make you fast, but fast isn't enough against opponents who know exactly what you'll do. The three warbud split formation, classic pincer maneuver, designed to create overlapping fields of fire. The lead unit, Rivek's, based on the communication signature, moved to engage directly while the flankers positioned for crossfire. Professional, coordinated, exactly what Amuro would have done. So he did the unpredictable thing. Instead of evading, the Gundam accelerated directly toward Rivek's warbird, closing distance at maximum thrust. The beam rifle came up, and Amuro fired 3 shots in rapid succession. Rivek's warbird rolled away from the first beam, deflected the second with its shield, and barely avoided the third by firing lateral thrusters in a maneuver that pushed the mobile armor's structural limits. Good pilot, Amuro thought clinically. Excellent reflexes. But not a Newtype. The Gundam's Vulcan guns opened fire, 60mm rounds creating a wall of projectiles that forced Rivek to maintain evasive maneuvers. While the Cardassian pilot was focused on not getting shredded by conventional munitions, Amuro's Newtype senses felt the flanking warbuds preparing to fire. He felt their targeting solutions crystallize, felt the pilot's intent solidify into action, and the Gundam was already moving before the disruptor beams lanced through the space he'd occupied a heartbeat earlier. He's predicting our attacks, one of the flankers shouted over the comm, just like the report said. Then stop being predictable. Rivek snarled back. Pattern Delta 7. The warbuds shifted tactics instantly, their movements becoming deliberately chaotic, random thruster burns, unpredictable vectors, attack angles that violated standard doctrine. They were trying to overwhelm Amuro's precognitive abilities with sheer unpredictability, forcing him to react to what was happening rather than what would happen. It was working. A disruptor beam grazed the Gundam's shoulder armor, and warning lights flashed across Amuro's console. Another beam struck his shield, and he felt the Luna titanium heat up from the energy absorption. The third warbird, silent until now, launched a salvo of microtorpedoes that detonated around him in a sphere of explosive force. The Gundam tumbled through the blast radius, and Amuro fought to regain control. His Newtype senses were overloaded with too many threats, too many possible futures branching and collapsing. These pilots weren't just good, they were trained specifically to counter his abilities. Ensign Ray, you're taking damage. Dax's voice cut through the combat noise. Fall back and let the Defiant provide support. Negative, Amuro gritted out, wrenching the Gundam into a spiral that avoided another disruptor barrage. They'll just target the Defiant instead. This is mobile suit combat, your ship isn't equipped for it. On Deep Space Nine, Sisko watched the tactical display with growing concern. The mobile armor battle was unlike anything in Starfleet's experience, three-dimensional knife fighting at velocities that made conventional space combat look sluggish. And Amuro was losing. The station is taking fire from the battlecruisers, Kira reported. Shields holding at 70%, but if this continues. Defiant, break off support of the mobile suit, Sisko ordered. Engage the battlecruisers. We need to reduce the pressure on our shields. Worf's voice came back immediately. Aye, Captain. Adjusting attack vector. The Defiant peeled away from the mobile armor engagement, its quantum torpedoes streaking toward the Dominion capital ships. The battlecruisers returned fire, and space lit up with the exchange of destructive energies that characterized conventional warfare. But in the three-dimensional arena where mobile suits fought, a different kind of battle raged. Amuro drew a beam saber, the pink-white blade igniting with a sound like tearing reality. The Gundam's thrusters fired in a complex pattern, and he closed distance with the nearest warbird, the silent one, the one that had launched torpedoes. His Newtype senses focused entirely on that single opponent, blocking out the other two, accepting the risk of being blindsided in exchange for eliminating one threat. The warbird pilot saw him coming and drew its own melee weapon, a vibroblade that hummed with contained energy, Cardassian engineering adapted for mobile armor scale. The two machines clashed in a shower of sparks, beam saber meeting vibroblade in a contest of competing technologies. "You're good," the warbird pilot said, female voice, younger than Amuro expected. "But Takmur designed these platforms to match your speed. And there's 3 of us." She was right. Even as Amuro pressed the melee engagement, his Newtype senses screamed warnings about the other 2 warbirds repositioning. They were setting up another crossfire, using their teammate as bait to pin him in place. So Amuro did something crazy. He released the beam saber, let it drift in space, still ignited, and grabbed the warbird with the Gundam's free hand. The mobile armor's pilot shouted in surprise as the Gundam's manipulators clamped onto her machine's shoulder. Then Amuro fired all thrusters at maximum, using the captured warbird as a shield against the incoming disruptor fire. "Rivek, don't shoot," the female pilot screamed. "I'm in the line of fire." The other 2 warbirds hesitated, professional discipline warring with the tactical necessity of taking the shot. That half-second of hesitation was all Amuro needed. He released the captured warbird, retrieved his beam saber, and fired his Vulcan guns at Rivek's machine while simultaneously launching himself at the 3rd warbird. The 3rd pilot was good, incredibly good. He rolled his warbird away from Amuro's beam saber slash, fired thrusters in a pattern that created distance, and launched a spread of microtorpedoes that detonated in a staggered sequence designed to force Amuro into a predetermined vector. But Amuro's Newtype senses felt the trap before it closed. The Gundam's thrusters fired in a sequence that seemed random but was actually calculated with inhuman precision. The mobile suit spiraled through the explosion pattern, beam rifle coming up, and fired 2 shots. The first shot missed, deliberately. The megaparticle beam screamed past the warbird's cockpit, close enough that the pilot's instinct was to dodge away. Which put him exactly where the second shot would be. The beam struck the warbird's left leg, and the limb exploded in a cascade of secondary detonations. The mobile armor tumbled, its pilot struggling to maintain control with asymmetric thrust. Not destroyed, but crippled, out of the fight. "Damn you!" Rivek snarled. "You're not that much better than us." "I'm not," Amuro agreed, his voice cold. "But I've been fighting mobile suits for 4 years. You've been training for maybe 4 months. That's the difference." The female pilot's warbird rejoined Rivek's, and the 2 machines moved into a defensive formation. They were recalculating, Amuro realized. Adjusting tactics on the fly, learning from what he'd just done. Good pilots learn fast, and these were very good pilots. His Newtype senses flared with sudden, overwhelming alarm. Not from the warbirds, from behind. From the station. Amuro's head snapped around, and his tactical display confirmed what his precognitive abilities had sensed. A Jem'Hadar fighter squadron was breaking away from the main battle, accelerating toward the cargo bay where O'Brien and Nog were still coordinating repairs and logistics. They were targeting the engineers. The support personnel. The people who couldn't fight back. "Station, this is Gundam," Amuro transmitted. "You have Jem'Hadar fighters inbound on your cargo bay. Evacuate immediately." "We can't." O'Brien's voice came back, strained with urgency. "We're in the middle of rearming the station's defense satellites. If we evacuate now, DS-9 loses its automated defenses." Amuro's hands tightened on the controls. He was 30 seconds away from the cargo bay at maximum thrust. The Jem'Hadar fighters were 20 seconds out. And if he abandoned his engagement with the warbuds, they'd be free to attack the Defiant or the station itself. Impossible choice. Save the engineers or prevent the warbuds from escalating. Protect the people he could see or the people he couldn't. Choose who lived and who died based on tactical calculation rather than human value. He'd made these choices before. On White Base, in battles where every decision meant someone died. And each time, a piece of his humanity had eroded away, replaced by the cold mathematics of survival. But O'Brien had said something that stuck with him: you're supposed to carry it, acknowledge it, and find ways to keep living despite it. Rivek, Amuro transmitted on the open channel. You want to prove your warbuds are superior? Then prove you're better soldiers than the Jem'Hadar. There are non-combatants in that cargo bay, engineers, logistics personnel. If you have any honor at all, help me protect them. Silence on the comm, then Rivek's harsh laugh. You're asking the enemy for help. I'm asking soldiers if they're willing to kill unarmed engineers to win a battle, Amuro countered. Because if that's your standard, you're no better than the monsters who created the Jem'Hadar. More silence. Amuro's tactical display showed the Jem'Hadar fighters closing on the cargo bay. 15 seconds. O'Brien and Nog and two junior engineers who'd been running diagnostics, for lives that would end because Amuro couldn't be in two places at once. Damn you, Newtype, Rivek said finally. Then, on a different channel, less kit, Navok, break off engagement. Intercept those Jem'Hadar before they reach the cargo bay. We're soldiers, not murderers. The two warbuds peeled away from Amuro's position, their disruptors already charging. They accelerated toward the cargo bay with the same coordinated precision they'd used against the Gundam, and their weapons lit up the darkness with sustained fire. The Jem'Hadar fighters returned fire, but they were designed for space superiority, not close-quarters defense against mobile armor platforms. The warbuds tore through them with brutal efficiency, disruptor beams carving fighters apart, micro-torpedoes detonating in precise sequences, vibroblades flashing in melee range when the enemy got too close. In 90 seconds, the Jem'Hadar squadron was destroyed. Amuro watched it happen, his Newtype senses feeling the Jem'Hadar dying, brief flares of consciousness extinguished, slaves to the founders dying for orders they couldn't refuse. And he felt something else. Rivek's grim satisfaction not at killing, but at having made a choice that preserved his honor. O'Brien, Nog, status, Amuro transmitted. We're alive, O'Brien said, his voice shaky with adrenaline. Those Cardassian pilots just saved our lives. I don't understand what's happening, but thank them for us. On the open channel, Rivek spoke again. Ensign Ray, we're withdrawing. The Dominion will not be pleased with our tactical decision. But Tok'mar built these warbuds to prove that mobile armor could be more than weapons of terror. We're soldiers, not butchers. Then you're better than most, Amuro said quietly. The two warbuds retrieved their crippled teammate and accelerated away from the battle, their thrusters burning bright against the darkness. The Dominion battlecruisers, recognizing that their mobile armor support had abandoned the fight, began withdrawing as well. Within minutes, the enemy fleet was retreating through the wormhole, leaving behind only debris and the aftermath of choices made under fire. Sisko's voice came over the command channel, carrying a weight of implications. Ensign Ray, return to station. We need to debrief what just happened, because I'm not sure I believe it. As the Gundam glided back toward the cargo bay, Amuro sat in his cockpit and stared at his hands. They were shaking again, but for a different reason this time. He'd asked the enemy for help. And they'd answered. Maybe, just maybe, this universe was different after all. The debriefing room felt smaller than before, crowded with too many officers processing too many impossible events. Captain Sisko sat at the head of the table, his expression somewhere between bewildered and thoughtful. Major Kira paced near the viewport, her nervous energy barely contained. Commander Worf stood with arms crossed, his Klingon sensibilities clearly struggling with what had transpired. Dax occupied her seat with that ancient calm, though even her eyes held curiosity. Odo lurked in his customary corner, observing everything. Amuro sat at the far end, still wearing his normal suit, exhaustion written into every line of his body. Dr. Bashir had insisted on a medical scan, minor radiation exposure, elevated stress hormones, but nothing requiring immediate treatment. Just another battle's worth of damage accumulating in a body too young to carry so much violence. "Let me make sure I understand," Sisko said carefully. "In the middle of combat, you asked enemy pilots to help you defend our personnel. And they did." "Yes, sir," Amuro confirmed. "Why?" Kira demanded. "Why would Cardassian pilots betray the Dominion to save Federation engineers?" "Because they're soldiers, not slaves," Amuro replied. "The Jem'Hadar have no choice, they're genetically programmed to obey, addicted to a drug only the Founders control. But those Warbird pilots were volunteers. They made a choice to fight, which means they could make a choice to stop fighting for a moment and do the right thing." "That's a dangerous assumption," Odo interjected. "The Cardassians occupied Bajorans for decades. They committed atrocities that still haunt this sector. Assuming they have honor because they made one tactical decision is naive." "I didn't assume they had honor," Amuro countered. "I gambled that they wanted to prove something, that their mobile armors were superior to mine, yes, but also that they were better than the Jem'Hadar. Pride, not morality. But the result was the same." Worf spoke, his voice carrying grudging respect. "In Klingon culture, there is a concept, Kala said, that even enemies can share honor in battle. What you did was unconventional. But it demonstrates understanding of warrior psychology that goes beyond tactical training." "I fought alongside people I hated," Amuro said quietly. "In my universe, the Earth Federation and Xeon were both committing atrocities. But individual soldiers on both sides sometimes made choices that transcended orders. It didn't end the war, but it proved we were still human underneath the uniforms and ideologies." Dax leaned forward, her scientific mind working through implications. "The question is whether this changes anything strategically. The Warbirds withdrew, but they're not destroyed. The Dominion will analyze what happened, adjust their tactics, and deploy them again, probably with different pilots who are less susceptible to appeals to honor." "Agreed," Sisko said. "But we also gained something valuable. Ensign Ray demonstrated that the Gundam's capabilities extend beyond pure combat effectiveness. The ability to influence enemy decision-making through direct pilot communication is something our starship commanders don't have access to. Mobile suit combat is personal in a way fleet engagement isn't. It's also psychologically devastating," Bashir added, his genetically enhanced mind drawing connections. "Amuro, you mentioned feeling the Jem'Hadar dying. That's not metaphorical, your Newtype abilities literally force you to experience the deaths you cause. How are you coping with that?" "I'm not," Amuro said bluntly. "I just keep fighting because stopping would mean confronting it, and I don't have time for that luxury while people need me to pilot the Gundam." The room fell silent. Bashir looked like he wanted to protest, but what could he say? The war wouldn't stop because one soldier needed psychiatric care. It never did. The door chimed, interrupting the heavy atmosphere. Sisko called "Enter," and Garrick stepped inside, the station's resident Cardassian tailor, former Obsidian Order operative, and one of the most enigmatic individuals on DS9. He carried himself with that particular grace that suggested violence hidden beneath civilized veneer. "Captain," Garrick said pleasantly. "I hope I'm not interrupting. But I've received a most interesting communication that I believe Ensign Ray should hear." Sisko gestured toward an empty seat. "Go ahead, Garrick." Garrick activated a small data device, and a holographic image materialized, Ghoul Revek's face, stern and professional. The Cardassian pilot's voice played from the recording. "Ensign Amuro Ray. I am transmitting this message through back channels to ensure the Dominion doesn't intercept it. What happened during our engagement was unexpected. You appealed to our honor as soldiers, and we responded. But understand this, the Dominion will not make the same mistake twice. They're already reassigning the Warbird Squadron, replacing my pilots with Jem'Hadar who've been surgically modified to interface with mobile armor control systems. Amuro's blood ran cold. Jem'Hadar pilots. Soldiers who couldn't refuse orders, who wouldn't hesitate, who had no choice but to kill. Revek's image continued. Takmur is furious that we betrayed the Dominion. He's accelerating production of additional warbuds and designing modifications specifically to counter your tactics. Within 3 weeks, they'll have 6 operational units, all piloted by Jem'Hadar who've been conditioned to ignore any communication from you. They'll hunt you specifically, Ensign Ray. And they'll destroy anything that gets in their way. The recording shifted to display technical schematics, upgraded warbird designs with enhanced armor, more powerful weapons, and what appeared to be neural interface systems designed for Jem'Hadar physiology. I'm providing these specifications because what I saw during our battle disturbed me, Revek said. You could have destroyed my warbuds. Your mobile suit is superior, and your abilities gave you every tactical advantage. But you hesitated. You tried to minimize casualties even while fighting for your life. That's not something I expected from the White Devil that Dominion intelligence described. He paused, and his expression shifted to something almost human. My daughter asked me once what honor meant. I told her it meant making the right choice even when it costs you everything. Today, I made that choice. And now the Dominion has branded me a traitor. My family is in hiding, my career is destroyed, and the warbuds I helped develop will be used by monsters who can't appreciate what they pilot. The recording showed one final image, a data packet containing complete technical specifications for the upgraded warbuds, tactical doctrine, deployment schedules, and pilot training protocols. Use this information to survive, Ensign Ray. And if you ever face Jem'Hadar in mobile armor, remember, they're slaves who deserve mercy, not the monsters who enslaved them. Revek out. The hologram faded. The room remained silent, everyone processing what they'd just witnessed. Garrick, Sisko said carefully. How did you receive this transmission? Through channels I'd prefer not to disclose, Garrick replied with his characteristic evasiveness. Let's simply say that not all Cardassians support the Dominion Alliance, and some of us maintain communication networks that operate outside official oversight. Can we verify this information? Worf asked. Corbin in Tech has already confirmed the technical specifications, Odo said from his corner. The upgraded warbird designs match intelligence he provided earlier. And the deployment schedule aligns with Dominion fleet movements we've been tracking. This appears to be legitimate. Amuro stared at the technical schematics, his engineering knowledge combining with combat experience to understand exactly how dangerous these upgraded warbuds would be. Neural interfaces meant faster reaction times. Enhanced armor meant his beam rifle would need multiple hits to penetrate. And Jem'Hadar pilots meant no hesitation, no mercy, no possibility of appealing to shared humanity. 6 warbuds, he said quietly. Piloted by Jem'Hadar who've been surgically modified and conditioned to kill me. And they'll deploy in 3 weeks. Can you defeat them? Kira asked bluntly. In open space. Maybe 3 or 4 before the others overwhelm me. But if they attack near a populated area, if they use civilians as leverage or tactical cover, Amuro shook his head. The Gundam is powerful, but it's still just one mobile suit. I can't be everywhere at once, and I can't fight indefinitely. Then we need to even the odds, Sisko said. Dax, take this technical data and work with Chief O'Brien. Find weaknesses in the upgraded warbird designs. Anything we can exploit. Already on it, Dax confirmed, her fingers flying across a PADD. Worf stood, his tactical mind working through scenarios. Captain, I recommend we coordinate with Starfleet Command. If the Dominion is deploying mobile armor platforms across multiple fronts, we need a unified response strategy. The Gundam cannot be the only answer. Agreed, Sisko said. He turned to Amuro. Ensign, I know you don't want the Federation building mobile suits. But we need to discuss alternatives. What if we developed countermeasures specifically designed to combat mobile armor? Weapons, tactics, defensive systems, without creating our own mobile suit fleet. Amuro considered this carefully. It was a compromise, but a reasonable one. Targeting systems that can track high-speed, three-dimensional combat. Enhanced shields calibrated against directed energy weapons. Point defense systems that can intercept microtorpedoes. And most importantly, pilot training. Your fighter pilots need to understand mobile armor combat doctrine. I can help with that, Worf said immediately. Klingon warrior training emphasizes three-dimensional combat and honor duels. The principles translate. This is assuming we have 3 weeks, Kira interjected. But the Dominion rarely gives us the luxury of preparation time. They could accelerate deployment, or send the existing warbirds with Jem'Hadar pilots earlier than Rivek predicted. Then we prepare as if they're coming tomorrow, Sisko decided. Ensign Ray, I need you to work with our tactical staff. Document everything you know about mobile suit combat, maneuvers, vulnerabilities, pilot psychology. Treat it like you're training soldiers to fight against yourself. That's essentially what I'd be doing, Amuro said. In my universe, the Earth Federation captured Zeon mobile suits and reverse-engineered tactics by analyzing how their own pilots fought. It's effective, but it also means revealing every advantage I have. Do you have a better option? Odo asked dryly. Amuro didn't. And that was the problem. In war, you chose between bad options and worse options, and survival meant making the choice you could live with. Literally. The briefing continued for another hour, dissecting strategies and analyzing data until Amuro's head pounded from exhaustion and information overload. By the time Sisko dismissed everyone, the station's chronometer showed 0300 hours, deep into the night cycle, when only essential personnel remained on duty. Amuro trudged toward his quarters, his body moving on autopilot. He was so tired that he almost didn't notice the figure waiting outside his door until his Newtype senses registered a familiar presence. Garrick stood there, immaculately dressed as always, holding 2 glasses of what appeared to be Canner, Cardassian liquor that O'Brien had once described as liquid regret. Ensign Ray, Garrick said pleasantly. I thought you might appreciate some company. And perhaps a drink, though I warn you that Canner is an acquired taste. I don't drink, Amuro said automatically, then reconsidered. Or I didn't. I'm not sure what I do anymore. A common feeling during wartime, Garrick replied. He offered 1 glass, and Amuro accepted it with the resignation of someone too tired to argue. They entered the quarters together, and Garrick settled into a chair with the easy grace of someone comfortable in any environment. Why are you here? Amuro asked, sipping the Canner and immediately regretting it. The taste was somewhere between medicine and battery acid. Because I recognize something in you, Garrick said. The look of someone who's been fighting so long they've forgotten why they started. The Obsidian Order trained me to be a weapon, a spy, an assassin, a tool for Cardassia's intelligence apparatus. And for years, I convinced myself that was enough. That serving a cause meant I didn't need an identity beyond my function. He swirled his Canner thoughtfully. Then I was exiled to this station, branded a traitor, cut off from everything I'd known. And I discovered something troubling. Without the Order defining me, I didn't know who I was. I had to rebuild an identity from fragments, learn to be Garrick the tailor instead of Garrick the operative. Is there a point to this story? Amuro asked, though he suspected he knew. The point, my dear Ensign, is that you're facing the same crisis. You've been the Gundam's pilot for so long that you can't separate yourself from the machine. And now you're in a universe where you could choose to be something else, but you don't know how. Garrick leaned forward. So let me offer some advice from one weapon to another. Start making choices that aren't about fighting. Small choices. Have dinner with someone. Explore the promenade. Read a book. Prove to yourself that you're still human underneath the soldier. And if I can't? Amuro asked quietly. Then you become like the Jem'Hadar, Garrick said. A weapon that exists only to be used, with no life beyond combat. And that, Ensign Ray, would be the greatest tragedy of all. After Garrick left, Amuro sat alone in his quarters, staring at the half-finished glass of terrible Cardassian liquor. Outside his window, Deep Space Nine continued its eternal vigil, a fragile bubble of order surrounded by the vast darkness of space and the endless war grinding away at civilization's edges. He thought about Rivek, who'd sacrificed everything to make one right choice. He thought about O'Brien and Nog, who'd risked their lives repairing station defenses because someone had to. He thought about Sisko, carrying the weight of impossible decisions every day and somehow maintaining principles despite the compromises. And he thought about himself, 19 years old, impossibly far from home, piloting a war machine in someone else's conflict, trying to figure out if he was a person or just a weapon with delusions of humanity. His hands had stopped shaking. That probably wasn't a good sign. The training simulator was a testament to Federation engineering, a massive holographic chamber that could recreate any combat scenario with near-perfect fidelity. Amuro stood in the center, wearing a sensor harness that tracked his movements while holographic warbuds materialized around him in three-dimensional space. They weren't real, but his Newtype senses registered them anyway, phantom threats that triggered the same combat reflexes as actual enemies. Commander Worf occupied the observation deck above, analyzing Amuro's movements while Lieutenant Commander Dax recorded combat data. Chief O'Brien monitored the holographic systems, and a dozen Starfleet fighter pilots watched with the intense focus of students studying a master. Scenario 7, Worf announced. 6 hostile warbuds, upgraded specifications provided by Ghoul Rivek. Jem'Hadar piloting profiles based on known combat patterns. Civilian transport convoy in the engagement zone. Begin. The holographic warbuds activated, their movements precise and coordinated. No hesitation, no wasted motion, just pure predatory efficiency. They split into 2 groups immediately, one moving to engage Amuro while the other accelerated toward the convoy of holographic civilian ships. It was a familiar tactical problem. Divide the defenders' attention. Force them to choose between protecting themselves and protecting others. Exploit the fact that heroes had weaknesses that soldiers didn't. Amuro's training kicked in automatically. His mind calculated vectors, assessed threat priorities, predicted attack patterns. The holographic warbuds were good, better than the real ones he'd fought, because these were programmed with perfect coordination and no emotional vulnerabilities. He couldn't save everyone. The realization hit him like a physical blow. No matter how fast he moved, how precisely he fought, how perfectly he executed tactics, the math didn't work. 3 warbuds would reach the convoy before he could intercept. And once they opened fire on unshielded civilian transports. Simulation pause, Amuro said. The holographic scenario froze. Worf's voice came over the intercom. Ensign. The scenario is not complete. I know, Amuro replied. That's the problem. This isn't a scenario I can win. Not alone. He climbed out of the simulator chamber and joined the observers on the deck. The Starfleet pilots looked disappointed, they'd been expecting to see the legendary mobile suit pilot pull off another miracle. Instead, they'd watched him acknowledge defeat before the battle even concluded. Explain, Worf said, his tone not accusatory but genuinely curious. Amuro gestured at the frozen holographic battlefield. In mobile suit combat, the primary advantage is mobility and concentrated firepower. One pilot in an advanced platform can dominate conventional forces because ships and fighters are designed for different tactical paradigms. But when you face multiple mobile armors with equivalent capabilities, the advantage disappears. It becomes a numbers game, and I'm outnumbered 6-1. So how did you survive in your universe? One of the fighter pilots asked. You said you fought for 4 years. You must have faced overwhelming odds before. I had support, Amuro said quietly. White Base, my ship, had a crew that provided tactical coordination, resupply, fire support. And eventually, the Earth Federation deployed other mobile suits. I was never fighting completely alone, even when it felt that way. He looked at the assembled Starfleet officers. Here, I'm one mobile suit in a universe that doesn't understand mobile suit warfare. And the Dominion is adapting faster than you can build countermeasures. Then what do you suggest? Sisko asked. He'd arrived during the simulation, watching from the back of the observation deck. Amuro took a breath, knowing what he was about to say would contradict his earlier position. I think we need to reconsider mobile suit development. Not a fleet of them, not mass production. But maybe 2 or 3 units piloted by people who can handle the psychological stress. Enough to even the odds when the warbuds deploy. The room fell silent. This was the line Amuro had said he wouldn't cross, advocating for weapons development that could lead to an arms race. But watching the simulation had forced him to confront an uncomfortable truth: principles were meaningless if everyone died defending them. That's a significant change in position, Sisko said carefully. I know, Amuro admitted. But I've been thinking about what Ghoul Rivek did, sacrificing his career and safety to make the right choice. And I realized I've been making choices based on fear of what might happen instead of dealing with what is happening. The Dominion is building warbuds. That's a fact. And me refusing to help the Federation develop countermeasures doesn't change that fact, it just means more people die. Dax leaned forward, her ancient eyes thoughtful. Building mobile suits requires resources we don't have in abundance. The Gundam's Luna titanium armor alone is a material we can't replicate. And training pilots to your skill level would take years we don't have. You don't need pilots at my skill level, Amuro countered. You need competent pilots who understand three-dimensional combat and can work as a coordinated team. The Gundam is exceptional because it was a prototype built by geniuses. But the Earth Federation's mass production units, GMs, were simpler, cheaper, and still effective when used properly. Chief O'Brien was already pulling up holographic displays, his engineers' mind racing through possibilities. If we simplified the design, used materials we can actually source, and focused on core capabilities rather than trying to match the Gundam's full specifications, we might be able to produce basic mobile suits in 8 to 10 weeks. That's still longer than the 3 weeks before the warbuds deploy, Kira pointed out. Then we survive those 3 weeks, Amuro said. And when the Federation mobile suits are ready, we have a force multiplier that changes the strategic calculation. The Dominion won't be able to deploy warbuds without facing organized opposition. Worf spoke, his warrior's pragmatism cutting through the theoretical discussion. This assumes Starfleet Command approves the project. Mobile suit development represents a significant doctrinal shift. There will be resistance from admirals who believe in traditional fleet combat. Let me handle Starfleet Command, Sisko said. Right now, we have a more immediate problem. Ensign Ray is right, we need to survive the next 3 weeks. That means preparing DS-9's defenses for an assault by Jem'Hadar piloted warbuds. Dax, what did you find in the technical specifications Rivek provided? Dax called up holographic schematics of the upgraded warbuds. The neural interface systems are the key vulnerability. They allow faster reaction times, but they also create a direct connection between the pilot's brain and the mobile armor systems. If we can generate a specific EM pulse, something that disrupts the neural interface without affecting other systems, we could temporarily disable the warbuds. How temporarily? Amuro asked. 3 to 5 seconds. Maybe less if the Jem'Hadar pilots are adapted for neural stress. That's enough, Amuro said immediately. In mobile suit combat, 5 seconds is an eternity. If I can disable a Warbird's interface and know exactly when it'll come back online, I can position for a kill shot. There's a complication, O'Brien interjected. Generating that specific EM pulse requires specialized equipment we don't have installed on the station. We'd need to fabricate emitter arrays, calibrate them precisely, and position them to cover the engagement zone. That's minimum 4 days of round-the-clock work. Then we start now, Sisko decided. Chief, coordinate with Lieutenant Nog and prioritize this project. Ensign Ray, continue working with our tactical staff. I want every Starfleet officer on this station to understand mobile armor combat doctrine. Worf, prepare the Defiant for close support operations. If those warbuds attack, we'll need every advantage we can manufacture. The meeting dissolved into organized chaos as officers dispersed to their assignments. Amuro found himself standing alone in the simulator chamber, staring at the frozen holographic battlefield. The warbuds hung in space like monuments to his failure, 6 opponents he couldn't defeat alone, civilians he couldn't save, a scenario that ended in tragedy no matter how skilled he was. Thinking about the simulation. Kira's voice made him turn. She'd stayed behind while the others left, her expression thoughtful. Thinking about all the times I've faced scenarios like that in real life, Amuro said. White Base was always outnumbered. Always fighting against impossible odds. And sometimes we lost. Sometimes I made the tactical calculation and decided that saving the ship meant abandoning civilians. Or that destroying an enemy position was worth the collateral damage. How do you live with those choices? Badly, Amuro admitted. I tell myself they were necessary. That more people would have died if I'd made different decisions. But the faces still haunt me, the people I could have saved if I'd been faster, smarter, better. Kira moved to stand beside him, both of them staring at the frozen holographic battle. During the occupation, I made similar choices. Planted bombs knowing civilians might be in the blast radius. Sacrificed resistance cells to protect larger operations. Killed people because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. She paused. The prophets taught me something after the occupation ended. They exist outside linear time, they see all moments simultaneously. And they said that every choice creates ripples that extend forever. The people I saved went on to save others. The people I couldn't save became martyrs who inspired the resistance to continue fighting. That's not comforting, Amuro said. It just means the weight of those choices is even heavier. No, Kira corrected gently. It means that even our failures matter. Even our mistakes contribute to something larger. You couldn't save everyone, no one can. But the people you did save went on to live lives that had meaning. That has to count for something. Before Amuro could respond, alarm klaxons shrieked through the station. Red alert lights flashed, and Sisko's voice came over the intercom with controlled urgency. All hands to battle stations. Long-range sensors detect a massive Dominion fleet emerging from the wormhole. Multiple capital ships, fighter screens, and confirmed mobile armor signatures. They're not waiting 3 weeks, they're attacking now. Amuro's Newtype senses flared with overwhelming premonition. Danger. Death. Violence on a scale that made previous battles seem like skirmishes. And underneath it all, a cold calculation that felt distinctly like founder logic. The Dominion had analyzed his capabilities, his psychology, his weaknesses. And they'd designed this assault specifically to destroy him. How many warbuds, he asked, already knowing the answer would be bad. Dax's voice came over the comm, strained with barely controlled fear. Sensors are reading 12 mobile armor platforms. Repeat, 12 warbuds. They brought double what Rivek predicted. And Benjamin, they're heading straight for the civilian refugee camps on Bajorans. Amuro felt his blood run cold. Not the station. Not a military target where he could justify fighting and killing. The Dominion was targeting civilians specifically to force him into an impossible choice: defend Deep Space Nine and let thousands die on Bajorans, or abandon the station to save the refugees and leave Starfleet's forward operating base vulnerable. The same scenario as the simulation. Except this time, real people would die based on his decision. "Captain," Amuro said, his voice steady despite the terror clawing at his chest. "I'm launching immediately. Tell the Defiant to defend the station. I'll handle the warbirds." "Alone?" Sisko said. "Ensign, there are 12 of them." "I know," Amuro interrupted. "But those civilians don't have anyone else. And I'd rather die trying to save them than live knowing I chose not to." He ran from the simulator chamber, his boots pounding against the deck plating. Kira's voice called after him, something about backup, about waiting for support, but he couldn't wait. Every second of delay meant the warbirds got closer to defenseless refugees. The cargo bay was organized chaos. O'Brien and Nog were already running pre-flight diagnostics, the Gundam standing ready in the center of the bay like a silent guardian. Amuro climbed the ladder with practiced speed, his hands finding the cockpit controls before his conscious mind even registered the motion. "Reactor status," he barked. "Full power," Nog called back. "Beam rifle charged, 14 shots. Vulcan guns loaded. Beam sabers operational. Shield integrity 100%. You're good to launch, but Ensign, 12 against 1. Those odds." "I know the odds," Amuro said. The cockpit sealed around him, and the Gundam systems hummed to life. "Tell Chief O'Brien I'm sorry I won't be able to help with the mobile suit development project. He would have built something amazing." "Don't talk like that," Nog shouted. "You're going to survive this. You have to." Amuro didn't respond. His Newtype senses were already reaching out, feeling the approaching warbirds, the cold determination of Jem'Hadar pilots who knew nothing but obedience and war. 12 mobile armors piloted by slave soldiers, targeting civilians to force one enemy pilot into a killing ground. This was what war really looked like. Not noble battles between equals, but calculated cruelty designed to exploit the humanity of people who still cared about protecting the innocent. "RX-78-2 Gundam," Amuro announced, his voice carrying across all frequencies. "Launching." The cargo bay doors opened. The Gundam's thrusters fired. And Amuro Ray accelerated toward a battle he couldn't win, because some things mattered more than survival. Even if no one would be alive to remember that he tried. Bajor's upper atmosphere burned with re-entry friction as the Gundam descended through the cloud layers at emergency velocity. Amuro's console screamed warnings about heat stress and structural integrity, but he ignored them. The warbirds had a 10-minute head start, and every second he spent decelerating safely was another second those 12 mobile armors got closer to the refugee camps. His Newtype awareness reached ahead, sensing the terrain below, rolling hills, agricultural settlements, and the sprawling temporary structures that housed Bajorans displaced by the war. 50,000 people, maybe more, clustered in camps that had minimal defenses because they weren't supposed to be military targets. The Dominion didn't care about that distinction. The warbirds were already visible, 12 dark silhouettes dropping through the atmosphere in formation, their thruster trails painting lines of fire across Bajor's sky. They moved with mechanical precision, Jem'Hadar pilots executing orders without hesitation or doubt. Target the camps. Draw out the Gundam. Eliminate the threat. Simple, brutal, effective. All warbird units, a cold voice transmitted over an open channel, Borda accent, Wayoun's familiar intonation. The Founders have authorized complete destruction of the refugee settlements if the mobile suit does not surrender. Ensign Ray, you have 60 seconds to power down your weapons and submit to Dominion custody. Failure to comply will result in 30,000 deaths. Choose wisely. Amuro's hands tightened on the controls. Of course they'd make it his choice. Of course they'd frame mass murder as his responsibility rather than theirs. The Dominion understood psychology as well as tactics: break the enemies while by making them complicit in atrocity. Weian, Amuro transmitted back, his voice cold as vacuum. Tell the founders I have a message for them. I'm listening, Weian replied, undoubtedly confident that Amuro would surrender to save the civilians. Tell them, Amuro said, that soldiers who target civilians aren't warriors. They're cowards hiding behind superior firepower. And the White Devil doesn't negotiate with cowards. The Gundam's beam rifle came up, and Amuro fired at maximum range. The megaparticle beam lanced across 3 kilometers of atmosphere, ionizing air molecules and creating a brilliant trail of light. The shot missed, deliberately, screaming past the lead warbird's cockpit close enough that the pilot would have felt the heat through his canopy. That was your warning shot, Amuro continued. The next one won't miss. You want me? Come get me. Leave the civilians alone, and face me like actual soldiers instead of murderers. Silence on the comm, then Weian's voice, carrying surprised calculation. How unexpected. The founders predicted you would surrender to prevent casualties. They'll be interested to learn they were wrong. All warbird units, a new voice commanded, Jem'Hadar, harsh and emotionless. Ignore the civilian targets. Engage the hostile mobile suit. Victory is life. The 12 warbirds broke formation immediately, their attack vectors converging on the Gundam's position with coordinated precision. No hesitation, no moral debate, just pure tactical execution from pilots who existed only to obey orders. Amuro felt them coming through his Newtype awareness, 12 minds focused on a single objective, 12 sets of attack patterns analyzing his position and calculating optimal firing solutions. They weren't individuals anymore, just extensions of the founders will made manifest through genetic engineering and neural conditioning. He'd seen this before. Zeon's most fanatical soldiers, the ones who'd been so thoroughly indoctrinated that they'd become weapons wearing human skin. The difference was that the Jem'Hadar never had a choice about what they became. The first 3 warbirds opened fire simultaneously. Disruptor beams converged on the Gundam's position from multiple angles, a kill box designed to overwhelm his defenses through sheer volume of fire. Amuro's Newtype senses felt the attacks crystallizing, and the Gundam was already moving. Thrusters fired in a complex sequence, and the mobile suit spiraled through the convergent beams untouched. His beam rifle tracked the leftmost warbird, compensating for atmospheric interference and Minovsky particle distortion. He fired once. The megaparticle beam struck the warbird's center mass, and the upgraded armor held, barely. The mobile armor tumbled backward from the impact, its pilot fighting to maintain control. Tougher than before, Amuro noted clinically. Revex specifications were accurate. 3 more warbirds attacked from his flanks, their microtorpedo launchers releasing synchronized salvos. The projectiles streaked toward him in overlapping patterns, each one tracking his heat signature with sophisticated guidance systems. Amuro's Vulcan guns opened fire, creating a defensive screen of 60mm rounds that detonated incoming torpedoes in cascades of premature explosions. But while he was focused on point defense, 2 warbirds closed to melee range. Their vibroblades ignited with contained energy, and they attacked from opposite vectors, a classic pincer strike designed to overwhelm his ability to defend both directions simultaneously. Amuro drew both beam sabers in a fluid motion, the pink-white blades flaring to life. The Gundam's movements were almost balletic, a pirouette that brought one saber up to block the first warbird strike while the second saber swept low to intercept the other attacker. Contained energy fields clashed, and space distorted from the intersection of competing physics. The Jem'Hadar pilots pressed the attack with relentless efficiency. No fear, no self-preservation instinct, just pure mechanical execution of combat doctrine. They were trying to pin him in place while the other warbirds repositioned for killing shots. Amuro felt it through his Newtype awareness, the tactical net closing around him, 9 mobile armors moving into position while 2 kept him occupied in melee. Professional, coordinated, and utterly ruthless. These weren't pilots fighting for honor or glory. They were weapons following programming. So he did something unpredictable. The Gundam released its shield, just let it go, the massive Luna titanium slab spinning away from the mobile suit's grip. The unexpected maneuver caught both melee attackers off guard for a critical half-second. Amuro used that window to fire his thrusters at maximum emergency power, accelerating straight up while simultaneously firing his beam rifle downward. The megaparticle beam caught one warbird in mid-adjustment, punching through its lighter ventral armor. The mobile armor exploded in a brilliant fireball, its Jem'Hadar pilot dying without time to even register the threat. 1 down. 11 to go. The remaining warbuds adapted immediately. They stopped trying to pin him with melee attacks and shifted to ranged saturation fire, dozens of disruptor beams and microtorpedoes creating a three-dimensional cage of destructive energy. Amuro's Newtype senses were overloading from the sheer volume of threats, his precognitive abilities struggling to track so many simultaneous attack vectors. A disruptor beam grazed the Gundam's left shoulder. Another struck his right leg. Warning lights blazed across his console as armor integrity dropped to 85%. The mobile suit's reactor was running at 92% output, heat sinks approaching critical temperature. He'd been in combat for less than 3 minutes, and already the Gundam was taking damage faster than Luna titanium could dissipate. Below, on Bajoran's surface, the refugee camps watched the battle unfold. 50,000 people staring at the sky, seeing 12 dark mobile armors hunting a single white and blue defender, understanding that their lives depended on the outcome of a battle they couldn't influence. Amuro felt their fear through his Newtype awareness, a vast chorus of terror and desperate hope. Children crying. Parents clutching their families. Elderly Bajorans who'd survived the Cardassian occupation praying to the prophets for deliverance. All of them depending on a 19-year-old soldier from another universe to be good enough, fast enough, skilled enough to overcome impossible odds. The weight of it crushed down on him like physical pressure. This was why he hated being a Newtype. He couldn't just fight and kill in emotional numbness. He had to feel every life at stake, every consciousness depending on his actions, every death that would result from his failure. Focus, he muttered to himself. Block it out. Just focus. But he couldn't block it out. That was the curse of enhanced awareness, you experienced everything, whether you wanted to or not. 3 warbuds were repositioning for another coordinated strike. Amuro's beam rifle swung toward them, but he had only 9 shots remaining. 9 shots against 11 mobile armors. The math didn't work. His Newtype senses flared with sudden, desperate inspiration. The EM pulse systems O'Brien was building, they weren't ready, weren't installed, wouldn't be operational for days. But the principle was sound. If he could generate a similar effect using the Gundam's own systems. His hands moved across unfamiliar controls, accessing secondary systems he rarely used. The Gundam's Minovsky particle generators could be overloaded, deliberately pushed beyond safe parameters to create a massive EM discharge. It would fry half his own systems, leave him vulnerable for critical seconds, and might not even work against the warbud's shielded neural interfaces. But it was the only tactical option that changed the equation. Defiant, Deep Space Nine, anyone reading this, Amuro transmitted. I'm attempting an experimental countermeasure. If this works, I'll need immediate fire support. If it doesn't work, tell Captain Sisko I'm sorry I couldn't deliver on the mobile suit development project. Ensign, what are you planning? Sisko's voice came back, tight with concern. Something stupid, Amuro admitted. Stand by. He fired the Gundam's thrusters, accelerating directly toward the 3 warbuds instead of evading. Suicidal tactics by conventional assessment, closing distance when outnumbered was how pilots died. But Amuro's Newtype awareness was guiding him toward something he could barely perceive, a tactical solution that existed in the intersection of possibility and desperation. The warbuds opened fire, their disruptor beams converging on his approach vector. Amuro's beam rifle answered with 3 precise shots, not trying to destroy them, just forcing them to maneuver, herding them into a tighter formation. 20 meters. 15. 10. Close enough. Amuro triggered the Minovsky particle overload. The Gundam's reactor screamed as exotic particles flooded outward in an explosive wave, saturating local space with electromagnetic interference so intense it created visible distortions in the atmosphere. Every sensor within 100 meters went blind. Communications cut to static. And most critically, neural interface systems designed for precise pilot-machine connections suddenly experienced catastrophic feedback. The three closest warbuds convulsed, their movements becoming erratic as Jem'Hadar pilots struggled with sensory overload. Not disabled, the shielding was too good for that, but disrupted. Confused. Vulnerable for exactly the 3 to 5 seconds Dax had predicted. Amuro's own systems were failing. Half his display went dark. The reactor was overheating. Thruster control was intermittent. But his hands still worked, and the beam rifle was still functional. He fired 4 times in 2 seconds. 4 megaparticle beams at point-blank range against targets that couldn't properly evade. 3 warbuds exploded simultaneously, their Jem'Hadar pilots dying before their neural interfaces could recover from the EM disruption. The 4th shot missed, barely, because the Gundam's targeting computer had crashed and Amuro was aiming manually through half-blind sensors and pure Newtype instinct. 4 down. 8 remaining. But now his mobile suit was critically damaged. The reactor was redlining at 98% output. Thrusters were responding sluggishly. His beam rifle had 5 shots left. And the remaining warbuds had learned from their comrades' deaths, they were maintaining distance, refusing to cluster, adapting their tactics to counter his improvised EM weapon. Ensign Ray, status report. Worf's voice cut through the static. Alive, Amuro managed. Barely. Gundam is at 40% combat effectiveness. Need support immediately. Defiant is entering Bajoran's atmosphere, Worf replied. ETA 2 minutes. Can you survive that long? Amuro looked at his tactical display, 8 warbuds repositioning for a coordinated assault that would come from every direction simultaneously. His Newtype senses showed him the attack pattern forming, the killing vectors converging, the mathematical certainty of his own death approaching. 2 minutes was an eternity in mobile suit combat. It was also nowhere near enough time. I'll try, he said. The warbuds attacked. The battle ended not with triumph, but with survival. When the Defiant's quantum torpedoes screamed through Bajoran's atmosphere and detonated against the warbird formation, when Worf's tactical brilliance and Dax's piloting skill disrupted the coordinated assault just long enough for Amuro to land 3 more impossible shots, when the remaining 4 warbuds finally retreated through the wormhole carrying their dead, the refugee camps erupted in cheers that Amuro could feel through his Newtype awareness even as consciousness threatened to slip away. The Gundam knelt in a crater of scorched earth, its white and blue armor scarred by disruptor burns and microtorpedo impacts. The reactor was at 99% output, seconds from catastrophic failure. Amuro's hands shook on controls that barely responded, his body pushed beyond exhaustion into that dangerous territory where adrenaline was the only thing keeping biological systems functional. Reactor shutdown, he whispered, initiating emergency protocols. Emergency coolant systems. Full power down. The Gundam went dark, and Amuro sat in the silent cockpit feeling every injury his mobile suit had sustained as if they were wounds on his own body. 7 warbuds destroyed. 4 retreated. 50,000 civilians saved. The math should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like he'd barely postponed the inevitable. 3 weeks later, Deep Space Nine's industrial replicators hummed with continuous activity. Chief O'Brien's mobile suit development project had received full Starfleet authorization, and the first Federation mobile suit prototype was taking shape in a heavily secured construction bay. It wasn't elegant like the Gundam. O'Brien had designed something brutally practical, a mobile weapons platform built from materials the Federation could actually source and simple enough that competent pilots could learn to operate it in weeks rather than years. Amuro stood in the observation deck, watching engineers swarm over the prototype's frame. It looked wrong to him, too blocky, too utilitarian, missing the refined aesthetics that made the Gundam beautiful in its own lethal way. But it would work. And that was what mattered. "They're calling it the Federation Type 1, O'Brien said, joining him at the viewport. Not very creative, but Starfleet never had much imagination with naming conventions. We should have 3 operational units within 6 weeks. Won't match your Gundam's capabilities, but paired with proper tactics and coordination. They'll even the odds," Amuro finished. "That's all warfare really is, trying to create situations where the odds favor your survival slightly more than your enemies." O'Brien studied him with the concerned expression of someone who'd seen too many young soldiers carrying too much weight. "You've been quiet since the Bajoran's engagement. Bashir's worried about you. Hell, everyone's worried about you." "I'm fine." That's what every traumatized soldier says right before they're not fine. O'Brien leaned against the viewport. "You saved 50,000 people, Amuro. That should mean something." "It does," Amuro said quietly. "It means there are 50,000 people whose deaths would have been my fault if I'd failed. That's a heavy responsibility to carry." Before O'Brien could respond, Amuro's combadge chirped. "Ensign Ray, please report to Captain Sisko's office. We have visitors from Starfleet Command." Sisko's office was crowded with brass, Admiral Ross via viewscreen, several Starfleet tactical specialists in person, and standing in the corner with his characteristic inscrutability, a Section 31 operative that Amuro's Newtype senses immediately identified as dangerous despite the man's bland appearance. "Ensign Ray," Admiral Ross began without preamble. "Your actions at Bajorans have been reviewed at the highest levels. 7 Dominion mobile armors destroyed, civilian casualties prevented, and tactical intelligence gathered that will inform our mobile suit development program. Starfleet is prepared to offer you a field commission as lieutenant and formal assignment as mobile suit tactical specialist." Amuro had expected this. The Federation needed him, needed his skills, his experience, his willingness to pilot the Gundam into battles where conventional forces would fail. He could accept the commission, become a proper Starfleet officer, fight the Dominion War until either it ended or he died. It was the logical choice. The practical choice. "I need to know something first," Amuro said. "When the Federation mobile suits are operational, what happens to pilots who refuse to fight? Who decide that the psychological cost is too high?" The room fell silent. Admiral Ross's expression remained neutral, but the Section 31 operative shifted almost imperceptibly, a tell that Amuro's Newtype awareness caught immediately. "We're not the Dominion," Ross said carefully. "Starfleet doesn't conscript or coerce. Any pilot would be free to request reassignment. Unless that pilot possessed strategic capabilities that made them too valuable to reassign," the Section 31 operative interjected smoothly. "In which case, certain accommodations would need to be made to ensure continued service." Amuro's hands clenched. There it was, the implicit threat wrapped in bureaucratic language. "Serve willingly, or serve unwillingly, but either way, serve." "Ensign Ray isn't property," Sisko said, his voice carrying dangerous calm. "And this station isn't a recruiting office for Section 31's Black Ops programs." "Captain Sisko, I'm simply stating reality," the operative replied. "The Dominion War is an existential threat. Sometimes, individual preferences must yield to collective necessity." Amuro felt the familiar weight settling onto his shoulders, the expectation that he'd sacrifice himself for the greater good, that his needs and desires and humanity mattered less than his utility as a weapon. He'd felt this before in the Earth Federation, when politicians and generals had used him as propaganda while grinding him down through continuous combat deployment. And he'd promised himself, sitting in his quarters on Deep Space 9 weeks ago, that he'd make choices that were his. Not determined by guilt or duty or others' expectations, but genuinely his. "I'll accept the commission," Amuro said. Everyone relaxed slightly. "On 2 conditions." Admiral Ross raised an eyebrow. Conditions. First, I train the Federation mobile suit pilots personally. No one gets assigned to a combat platform until I'm confident they can handle both the tactical demands and the psychological stress. I won't be responsible for creating more broken soldiers. Agreed, Ross said immediately. Second, Amuro continued, looking directly at the Section 31 operative, I'm not an asset to be deployed without regard for my humanity. I'll fight when fighting is necessary. I'll defend people who can't defend themselves. But I also get time to be something other than a soldier. Time to figure out who Amuro Ray is when he's not piloting the Gundam. Because if I lose that, I become like the Jem'Hadar, a weapon that exists only to be used. And that helps no one. The Section 31 operative's expression didn't change, but Amuro felt the calculation behind those cold eyes. Assessing whether Amuro was more valuable compliant or eliminated, whether his skills outweighed the risk of an asset that insisted on autonomy. Your conditions are unusual, the operative said carefully. But acceptable. For now. Then we have an agreement, Admiral Ross concluded. Welcome to Starfleet, Lieutenant Ray. Captain Sisko will handle your formal integration. We'll expect regular reports on the mobile suit pilot training program. After the Starfleet personnel departed, Amuro stood alone with Sisko in the office. The captain poured 2 glasses of something amber and offered one to Amuro. You stood up to Section 31, Sisko said. That takes either courage or stupidity, and I'm not sure which. Probably both, Amuro admitted, accepting the glass. But I meant what I said. I won't become a weapon that only knows how to kill. I've seen what that does to people, saw it in myself, back in my universe. If I'm going to fight this war, I'm also going to fight to preserve the parts of me that are worth saving. Then you're already wiser than most soldiers twice your age, Sisko replied. For what it's worth, you'll have support here. This crew, we look out for each other. And we don't let Section 31 or Starfleet Command or anyone else turn people into expendable assets. Amuro raised his glass. To impossible standards and the people crazy enough to maintain them. Sisko smiled and clinked glasses. To humanity, even in the middle of war. That evening, Amuro stood in Quark's bar, the chaotic, noisy, gloriously alive heart of Deep Space Nine's civilian population. Nog had dragged him here, insisting that proper Starfleet officers needed to know how to relax. The young Ferengi was teaching him some incomprehensible game involving probability and deception, while nearby tables hosted Klingons singing drinking songs, Bajorans debating theology, and a group of off-duty Starfleet officers laughing about something that had happened during a recent away mission. It was messy and loud and utterly human in the best possible way. Amuro felt his Newtype awareness reach out, touching the minds around him, not sensing danger or calculating threats, but simply experiencing the presence of living people choosing joy despite the war grinding away at the galaxy's edges. And for the first time since arriving in this universe, he felt something other than the crushing weight of responsibility. He felt possibility. The war wasn't over. The Dominion would come again with new strategies and more warbuds. The Federation mobile suits would eventually deploy, and Amuro would train their pilots knowing that some of them would die in combat. Section 31 would continue watching him, waiting for the moment when his usefulness outweighed his insistence on autonomy. And somewhere in the vast multiverse, his original timeline continued without him, White Base's crew believing he was dead, the one-year war grinding toward its conclusion, everything he'd fought for existing in a reality he could never reach. But here, now, in this moment, he was Lieutenant Amuro Ray of Starfleet, sitting in a bar with a friend, learning a game he didn't understand, surrounded by people who'd chosen to see him as a person rather than a weapon. It wasn't the ending he'd wanted. It wasn't even the ending he'd have chosen if given the option. But it was an ending he could live with. And in war, that was as close to victory as anyone ever got. Above Deep Space Nine, the Bajoran wormhole pulsed with its mysterious light, a gateway between quadrants, a manifestation of the prophet's existence outside linear time, and a constant reminder that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than human understanding could encompass. Inside the station's secure construction bay, the Federation Type 1 mobile suit continued taking shape, engineers working around the clock to build weapons that might save lives or might simply extend the war's brutality. And in the cargo bay housing the RX-78-2 Gundam, the white and blue mobile suit stood silent and waiting, a warrior's rest between battles, a monument to choices made under impossible pressure, and a symbol of the truth that Amuro Ray had learned across 2 universes. Some fights couldn't be won. Some battles ended in tragedy regardless of skill or determination. Some wars ground down everyone they touched until nothing remained but exhaustion and trauma and the desperate hope that survival meant something. But as long as people kept choosing to fight for each other rather than against each other, as long as soldiers remembered they were human beings first and weapons second, as long as someone stood between the darkness and those who couldn't defend themselves, there was still a reason to keep fighting. Even when victory seemed impossible. Even when the cost seemed unbearable. Even when you were just one pilot, one mobile suit, one person trying to matter in a galaxy that often seemed designed to prove individual lives were meaningless. You fought anyway. Because that's what it meant to be human. And Amuro Ray, Newtype, pilot, soldier, and finally, person, had learned that some lessons were universal, regardless of which universe taught them.